Happy Friday, everybody. Yeah, it's been another busy news week here in South Africa. We'll try and look back and look forward as we do on the Newsroom show. Very good morning to you. Johannesburg is a picture once again of us.
Yes, Johannesburg is a picture, but of course we also focus on other issues of people not outside, but inside prison even. And
Yes.
of course, that is at the Kgosi Mampuru. Of course, Kendall, before I go there, just to greet you as well. Good morning to you.
No, hearty good morning to both of you. Very good.
You're also inside. But looking at prisoners today, and of course the Kgosi Mampuru, they are rioting last week. If you've seen the pictures, and of course we want to know from our viewers what they think in relation to that. They also want lifers to have parole immediately. So that's why we're asking that
We've
question.
seen exotic dancers in prison in recent times. It looks like they're having a good time there, isn't it?
Yes. To call them exotic dancers or cabaret dancers or strippers really depends on which side of the coin you're on.
Point of
Yes.
view, that's all it is. But interesting question. I think South Africans love to interact with this question because it's something that I think a lot of people have a view on. Let's have a look at what you guys are telling us early doors here.
Do we have too many? Do our prisoners have too many rights in prison? Waza says yes. They come back from prison being fat. Crime does pay in South Africa.
Was that wicked?
Siafana Zulu Esho, it comes north, yes, because some of them, they have cell phones there and all expensive things. Hashtag prison strike.
Hey, what are those expensive things, Fana? Anyhow, they say they have... This one from Katlejo, he says they have great benefits than any citizen out there. Free education, free skills training, free meals, free doctor consultation. No wonder they reoffend, he says. That's an interesting take on it. You don't really think about these things that cost you as a citizen so much money on the outside. It's all free inside the house.
And that's why we're asking you, of course, do you think they have too many rights, perhaps? We also posed that question to our guest this morning, but there's also other issues. Eben, the bell has rung in the UK.
Yep, it's it's the story of the last 24 hours. Last night, of course, B-Pottinger put forward an elaborate apology for the dealings that they've done here in South Africa. We put it to you. 230 people have voted already, Kendall.
Yes, we would like to find out from you, just so you remember, what should B-Pottinger be forced to disclose their dealings with the Gupta in South Africa? 90% of the 230 votes say yes.
Now, 10% are saying no, and I wonder who could that be? Tabiso says, yes, he must be forced to do so. There are many things that are happening here. Hashtag B-Pottinger.
This guy, Nazim says, I don't think he must be forced to disclose, but he must come and show us what are the dealings with the Guptas. Nazim, he's a PR agency.
Katlejo KG weighs in on this one. It says, we want legitimate proof of all Gupta dealings with Zuma and ministers implicated. They should be prosecuted and face jail if found guilty. Money owed.
Yeah, that's a big news story. We'll give you an update on it shortly, some of the developments on that and other stories. But we're also running a sports question. It's Friday and it's a big day in rugby circles in South Africa. Yes, the Kings and the Cheetahs. Well, they're facing the Chop. But we're asking you about the Kings specifically because they've played so well the last little bit and they look like a team on the up, and now suddenly they're going to be kicked out of Super Rugby.
Yeah, now fully they've been playing with heart and actually ignoring everything that's happening in the press and the media about them possibly facing the Chop. Today, SADO makes an announcement. We're asking you, do the Kings deserve to be dropped from Super Rugby?
Well, this one coming from Nazim. He says, before anything is done, we need to check if this team got the support it wants, or the players. Hashtag Kings.
Siafana says, for what reason? No, I don't think so. Yes, they've done well. They've certainly done well.
And Onuka Christian says, check the fitness, commitment, team skill range and winning zeal before making any final decision, else you'll end up purging the wrong idol.
The wrong idol. Well, this is not idols. This is the Newsroom show, and we're going to bring you up to date with all the developments around South Africa and the world over the next 3 hours. But let's get going with the news headlines.
The G20 summit in Germany begins today, but protest action has already grabbed the headlines. President Jacob Zuma says South Africa will use its participation in the G20 summit to lure investors and seek ways to create jobs. And the High Court here in Johannesburg will today rule on the South African National Editors Forum's application for an interdict against the Black First, Land First. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makhamate what's happening on the sports front.
Gentlemen, it's a massive weekend. We've got Formula 1 on the go out in Austria, but we also have a really great news for athletics fans, Wade van Niekerk fans. Quite a lot happening in the world of sports.
I'm glad you're hopping on the positives because the Proteas were poor late yesterday.
Unfortunately, I cannot ignore them in the headlines. They were very poor, but it's only day one. We're hoping they might even bowl England out before lunch today.
Let's hope so.
Remains to be seen. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports.
That's the end of proceedings on day one. And what a satisfying day it is for England's captain.
The Proteas bowling attack flounders after a blistering start, giving England the advantage after day one of the test at Lord's.
Van Niekerk goes in lane 5. A lot of eyes on the South African.
Wade van Niekerk is looking in ominous form for the World Championships as he blasts another long-standing Michael Johnson milestone, the 400-metre meeting record in Lausanne.
Van Niekerk now begins to stride away and eats up the ground and eases away from Makwala, whose stride is shortening. Great running in 3 from Zebe. And Van Niekerk there takes it. 43.63. It is indeed a meeting record. Game, Novak Djokovic.
And Novak Djokovic breezes through to the third round of Wimbledon with a straightforward victory over Adam Pavlicek.
6-2, 6-2, 6-1, and he got better and better.
All this in more detail we'll have for you later on. We'll also have a show today about the Garcia report on Qatar and Russia World Cups. Make sure you stick around for all of that from after 10 o'clock. For now, it's back to Elvis who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this morning. The G20 summit in Germany begins today, but protest action has already grabbed the headlines. Demonstrations in Hamburg turned violent as German police clashed with masked anti-capitalist activists. Now, what was a peaceful march by around 12,000 people protesting against globalization was halted as police used water cannons and tear gas to disperse around 1,000 far-left militants. 76 police officers were injured. The demonstration, dubbed Welcome to Hell, was organized by the Alliance of Anti-Capitalist Groups. They are against the G20 for failing to solve many of the issues threatening world peace. Up to 100,000 demonstrators are expected before and during the two-day Group of 20 meeting. Around 20,000 police officers will be on standby for the main demonstration. President Jacob Zuma says South Africa will use its participation in the G20 summit to lure investors and seek ways to create jobs. He was speaking to the SABC ahead of the two-day meeting.
Highlight the issues from the continent. We have always done so. In the last G20, Africa was discussed very positively by the G20. We'll expect that to continue because we believe the problems of the continent and challenges are well known. And we believe that our being here, in a sense, although we are not members because we represent Africa, but in another sense we do because we are the African country understanding the challenges of the continent. So we are happy that on the agenda there is a session that will deal with the matters of Africa.
The High Court in Johannesburg will today rule on the South African National Editors Forum's application for an interdict against Black First, Land First. SANEF wants the court to order the BLF to stop intimidating 11 journalists. BLF has threatened to continue its protest against these journalists whom it accuses of racism.
SANEF and 11 journalists and editors urge the court to uphold media freedom. They seek an interdict against BLF from harassing, intimidating, assaulting and threatening journalists. Last week, the movement demonstrated outside editor Peter Bruce's home, vandalizing property and assaulting 2 members of the media.
Attorneys were also able to demonstrate that, there has been an orchestrated campaign to threaten our journalists. It has been harassment.
A list of names of 8 white and 3 black journalists, accusing them of being biased and racist. It posted threatening social media messages against them.
The South African National Editors Forum approached the court to get an interdict against the Black Land First movement, not about their right to protest, but only about the threatening tone of some of their tweets and also the actions against 3 editors.
The BLF asked the court to scrap the case, saying it was not urgent. However, the court ruled in SANEF's favor.
We are going to continue to protest against any racist journalist. We are not going to stop.
The Western Cape says those involved in harassment of journalists should be arrested and prosecuted.
Journalists, irrespective of the perspective which they have, they must be respected. Their right as journalists must be protected. And what has happened needs to be condemned with the strongest terms possible.
Judgment is expected to be handed down at midday. Hasina Gori, SABC News.
Save South Africa and the Democratic Alliance have called on British public relations firm B-Pottinger to disclose all dealings with the Guptas and President Jacob Zuma. The British company yesterday apologized to anyone impacted by the work it did for the Gupta family and its Obey company. The firm stopped working for the Guptas 3 months ago as pressure mounted over allegations of state capture. B-Pottinger had been accused of helping to orchestrate social media attacks on journalists who did exposés on the Guptas. The firm was also accused of fomenting racial divisions by promoting the term white monopoly capital in attempts to divert attention away from the Gupta family. B-Pottinger says it has dismissed the official who was in charge of the Gupta account and suspended 2 other employees. And that, of course, is the reason why we're asking you this question on our poll today. Should B-Pottinger be forced to disclose all dealings with the Guptas in South Africa? Thus far, 270 votes in, 90% of you are saying yes, and 10% by the BLF are saying no. So let me know what's on your mind. You can let us know on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on the Facebook page. Moving on now, the International Criminal Court has given South Africa 5 days to appeal its ruling that Pretoria was in breach of an obligation to arrest Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. The South African government was earlier taken to task by the court for failing to execute an arrest warrant against al-Bashir while he attended an African Union summit in Sandton in 2015.
In addition to its finding of non-compliance with South Africa's obligations under the Rome Statute, the court also decided not to impose further punitive measures against Pretoria, which allowed for 2 courses of action. One, to refer South Africa to the Security Council, because it was the Council itself that referred the situation in Sudan's Darfur region to the court in the first place. Or 2, to refer South Africa to the Assembly of States Parties of the Rome Statute for possible censure, the court finding that neither of these actions was warranted.
In these circumstances, a referral of South Africa's non-compliance with the court's request for arrest and surrender of Omar al-Bashir would be of no consequence as a mechanism for the court to obtain cooperation.
South Africa had argued 2 distinct legal bases for not arresting Sudan's president. First, that customary international law prevented it from arresting a sitting head of state. And secondly, the host agreement it entered into with the African Union. But the Chamber was not persuaded.
The Chamber is not persuaded by South Africa's latter argument and considers that Article 7(1) of the host agreement on its terms does not apply to Omar al-Bashir and thus could not have conferred upon him any immunity.
The Chamber also found that it was unable to identify a rule in customary international law that would exclude immunity for a head of state when their arrest is sought for international crimes by another state, even when the arrest is sought on behalf of an international court, in this instance, the ICC.
No immunity needs to be waived, and state parties can execute the court's request for arrest and surrender of Omar al-Bashir without violating Sudan's rights under international law. Accordingly, South Africa was under the duty to arrest Omar al-Bashir and surrender him to the court while he was on South African territory in June 2015.
Even if the justices had referred South Africa to the Security Council, it's unclear what action, if any, might have been taken given the composition of this council. China, Russia and the United States, all permanent members, are themselves not party to the Rome Statute, and because of these powerful countries that do not recognize the ICC's jurisdiction, South Africa was likely to escape censure anyway. What seems more likely now is further action against the government in South African domestic courts. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Now, to unpack this judgment by the ICC, we're joined in studio by Professor Mia Swart. She's a professor in international law at the University of Johannesburg. Professor, very good morning to you and welcome.
Thanks, Bakamile.
The ICC has now ruled. Your take on this, and what does it mean for the country?
Well, it doesn't have, very substantial implications. In a sense, this reflects badly on us. But in terms of follow-up, in terms of implementation, in terms of, a sanction, not much will happen. In my view, it's a rap on the knuckles more than anything else. Yeah.
Now, South Africa has 5 days to appeal this particular judgment. If we don't, what then? What happens after that?
If we don't appeal, it simply means, of course, that the decision stands and that we're held in non-cooperation. As I just said, not much flows from that. And that is part of my own skepticism of this kind of decision, that it's highly symbolic. It means that in the eyes of the international community, we might lose some face. But I certainly don't think government is too concerned about that.
Some are saying that, as you indicated, it's a slap on the wrist, perhaps, and of course the matter was not referred to the Security Council. Does this mean that this is a get-out-of-jail card for South Africa?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, but we're not in jail, of course. We're not entirely in jail because other African states, have taken the same position. So they might be in jail with us, but this is not a major concern. We know that there's been 13 non-cooperation decisions, including, for states such as Malawi, Kenya, the DRC. So I think that, the more countries there are that decide not to cooperate, in a sense, it sort of destigmatizes non-cooperation, or it even, can reflect positively in the on a state in the eyes of certain leaders. And this is part of the problem.
Now, if a damaging measure will not be imposed on the country for our transgressions, why would the ICC then pursue this particular matter in any case?
Well, it's not unusual for a case or for a court, an international court, to have some sort of follow-up procedure. The European Court of Human Rights, for example, has a very formal implementation procedure that actually works. The problem with the ICC is that their implementation procedure, their follow-up procedure, doesn't actually work. You might know that they have the option of referring the case to the Security Council or the ASP, which has happened in every other non-cooperation decision, except for in this case, which in my view was the wrong decision. If I may elaborate on that.
Yes, please.
The court basically said that, there would be no point in referring us to the ASP, which is the Assembly of State Parties of the ICC, or the Security Council, which is possible because it's the Security Council that referred the situation in Sudan to the ICC. So because this referral is not going to be made to the ASP or we're not going to be reported to the ASP or the ICC, or the Security Council, yes. Those bodies will also not, see themselves as being responsible to enforce implementation in some way, to provide, basically put pressure on the South African government. Whereas in all other cases, they have been tasked with some role. They just didn't live up to that role. But in my view, it's not up to the court to say, oh, we will not refer it to those bodies because, there has been no follow-up in the past or there is no point.
We also know that South Africa has been advocating to occupy the one revolving permanent seat on the Security Council. This particular ruling by the ICC, will that harm our efforts, perhaps?
I suspect so, and I think this is where the sanction, in a sense, come in, and the real consequences is in terms of our standing in the international community, which has already taken a beating in terms of our performance on human rights, etc. And I think that we shouldn't be too arrogant about this and think that we will be the African state that will necessarily occupy that seat. We know that the Security Council reform is very slow. It's not even, really a priority. So I would say that, you know, in terms of our chances in the first place, which are not that high, this certainly affects our chances, yes.
Now, we also know that we want to pull out of the ICC. Will this strengthen the case for South Africa and other African states to pull out of the ICC because the ICC has been seen as biased towards African countries?
Right. So I've heard that government is quite, you know, now sort of fortified in its initial attempts and thinking around withdrawal, and that it's reviving the threat to withdraw. In my view, this is petulant and even childish, right? To say, okay, we've lost, now we will not play anymore, right? Because their chances of winning were so low in the first place. So it was pretty predictable that the ICC was going to support its previous decision, was going to stand on its principles, and that it wasn't going to, you know, decide against, in favor of the state. So I think this is reviving the withdrawal rhetoric. Whether it will actually happen is another question, but I think it is damaging to keep threatening with withdrawal. And my sense is that this time around there is a higher possibility that we might actually withdraw.
In closing, what lessons do you think, Professor, could South Africa learn from this whole episode, especially with the Omar al-Bashir case where he was not arrested here in South Africa?
Right. I think to learn a lesson, you must be willing to learn a lesson, and you must be willing to see that you've made mistakes. I don't think the state is there. I think that the state is acting in an arrogant way, and you have to live up to your international obligations, your treaty obligations. So if you sign a statute, then you must make sure that your behavior will be, you know, according to the obligations under that statute. Yeah.
Professor, I thank you so much for joining us here in studio. That was Professor Mia Swart, a professor in international law at the University of Johannesburg, giving us her take on the ICC ruling. What do you make of that? But today, we're focusing on prisoners at the Kgosi Mampuru, the second prison, who rioted and attacked warders after inmates demanded parole for eligible lifers, as well as better treatment by the department. Well, they had their dirty dancing, so now we're asking you that question. Do you think that prisoners have too many rights in prison here in South Africa? That's the question we pose to you. It's over to Eben to take it further.
Well, many of you on social media have already told me that you believe so, that you think so. Correctional Services, they've replied. They say that it has the capacity to deal with any disturbance by prisoners in South Africa's prisons. This, of course, after at Kgosi Mampuru prison in Pretoria, we saw them engage in an altercation with warders where one warder and one prisoner were injured. Now, it's believed that prisoners protested over a memorandum they submitted to the department a month or so ago asking for life-serving prisoners to be considered for parole.
Life-serving prisoners in Kgosi Mampuru embarked on a strike. This resulted in a scuffle with warders that left some of the inmates wounded. In Barberton prison, inmates went on a hunger strike. They are calling on the government to accelerate the administrative process on granting parole.
The standard which the expert is using is actually causing a harm to us as lifers, because they require things that we cannot produce. It depends on the department, that the department must make sure that all the necessary things are there. All we're asking now from the department, especially our president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, is that he must intervene in this matter, because Section 82(1)(a) gives power to the president to place every prisoner on parole.
Prisons that are reportedly affected include Boksburg, Barberton, Klerksdorp, Krienpant, Johannesburg, St. Albans, Westville, and Losperfontein.
Receiving the highest priority. It is receiving priority from the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Advocate Michael Masuta, and in fact to this end, last week he held a media briefing on the 29th of June, where he took the country through some of the challenges that are being experienced, as well as some of the measures being implemented by the department to address these concerns of lifers. The department does accept that there have been some challenges, and the department is going all out to address these challenges.
Over 200 life-serving inmates in Barberton Medium B prison are reported to be taking part in the hunger strike. 8 weeks ago, a similar protest took place in the same prison, and authorities were given 21 days to resolve it. Spepile Gunene, SABC News, Mbombela, Mpumalanga.
Well, some of you are tweeting me and telling me that our prisons are universities of crime. So that's why we're asking you the question, do you think that prisoners have too many rights in South Africa? And, well, these rights are guaranteed by the Constitution. Let's not mess around about that. But let's have a look what you guys are saying, because this one from Gustav, he says to us, they have the right to food, water, medical care, and be treated with dignity despite the crime, but certainly not to be entertained by strippers. Yeah, that's the one that caught all the headlines. We saw exotic dancers. Some called them cabaret entertainers that were in the prison here in Johannesburg. Mr. Malachi says to us, strip show entrance fee, KFC free, gym free, water and electricity free, internet free, education free, accommodation and doctors. It sounds like an ideal life if you look at it like that. Others, of course, tell me that it's very tough in South African prisons. Very tough. Lots of rapes, lots of assaults, lots of gang activity. Well, that's just the case. Keep tweeting us on this question. And now, after the break, I'll be speaking to the Chief Deputy Commissioner for Incarceration, Mr. James Smallberger, about exactly these issues and, of course, well, some of the concerning images that we've seen in recent times. But the big story, international story that's going on right now is protests in Hamburg. Now, these are live pictures coming in from the northern German city where the G20 summit will be taking place from today. This protest action have already been catching the headlines. I can tell you 12,000 people are said to be protesting here against globalization, have also attacked the police. You've seen they've been hit with water cannons, and these are live pictures of the the police continue to take action against the protesters, and they seem to be resolute. I can tell you 76 police officers have been injured now in protests that have been going on overnight. They are against the G20 for what they say, failing to solve issues threatening world peace, amongst other things. Now, around 20,000 police officers are in the city of Hamburg. Donald Trump is expected to arrive there a little bit later today, and I can tell you, when he arrives in Hamburg, you can expect these protests to increase in its intensity. Right now, well, he's expected this morning to land Air Force One in the city of Warsaw, Poland, which is about an hour's flight away from Hamburg. We'll keep an eye on these protests. President Jacob Zuma is there. Of course, the president has pointed out that he is quite happy to go here and look for investment and find ways to create jobs for South Africa. Live pictures coming in from Hamburg. We'll be right on top of it as it develops now. A picture of the day can be none other, well, then Poetry in Motion. That's what it's called, Poetry in Motion. I can tell you, he ran this record and he was almost walking across the line, was Wade van Niekerk. So it looks like he could go under 43 seconds if you ask me. That was a new record, meeting record in Lausanne last night. 43.62 he ran in Lausanne in the 400 meter. A stunning, stunning performance once again by the golden boy of world athletics, Wade Dreamer van Niekerk. Now for our comment of the day. Yeah, there's been a lot of unhappiness here in South Africa about Miss South Africa wearing gloves. It was apparently all an innocent thing. All volunteers were supposed to make gloves. This is our tweet of the day from Karabus. He says, gloves uproar. When you volunteer and make food, they make you wear gloves. It's all about hygiene, not racism. Simple. It was about hygiene and protecting the children. So that was a storm in a teacup here in South Africa. Let's see what's happening in the courts here. We'll start in the Northwest Province now. 2 men there are accused of killing a 16-year-old schoolboy at a small farming town of Kalini. Now, you will know this story. They are again expected to appear in the local magistrate's court. Lots of unhappiness. Of course, there were race riots in the little town that had South Africa set up and take notice. Here in Gauteng, you saw it on the news, the South African National Editors Forum, SANEF, is confident about today's High Court judgment, while the leader of the Black First, Land First movement says they have no trust in the white judge in this case. Yeah, it's all race in South Africa at the moment. Still in Gauteng, 7 men, including a police officer, arrested in connection with a heist. Our Tambo will appear in the Kempton Park Magistrates Court today. That's what it is. Let's just take a quick look to Monday. Now, on Monday, we'll talk about something that came, or the change that happened at the policy conference of the ANC. Radical economic transformation became a radical socio-economic transformation. On Monday, we'll unpack this, we'll talk about this and all the issues with it. The nationalization of the banks, we'll talk about land, we'll get all of that in one show on Monday, and we'll try and break it down and bring it to you. Right now, we'll take a break, but when I come back, I'll speak to James Smallberger about what's happening in our prisons.
He's still going. He popped it up with Jacob Peterson. Easy as that. What a response it is from the Cheetahs. Brilliant score.
Imran Tahir produced a superb performance with the ball. The Proteas leg spinner put his side in the driving seat, scalping 3 wickets for just 18 runs.
Gifton Gope is flying toward third, and he is there with a triple, his first in the big leagues.
It is a Ferrari front row lockout, unless Hamilton can get on pole, and he can't. Ferrari, for the first time since France in 2008, have locked out the front row.
For all your sports news, keep it locked to Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday from 20:30.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom. Now, the Correctional Service Department is facing increased demands from inmates serving life in prison to be released. The Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Advocate Michael Masuta, says the department was being litigated against at least 10 times a week in courts by lifers, claiming they now qualified for parole. The trend seemed to be that once lifers served a minimum of 25 years in prison, they believed they were automatically eligible for release. Now, to talk about this, we are joined in studio by Mr. James Smallberger, who is the Chief Deputy Commissioner for Incarceration and Correction at the Department of Correctional Services. Very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
I wanted to talk to you about a general question, because we've asked our viewers a question, is it too easy a life for prisoners in South Africa? And of course, they tell us, oh, free, everything free. They live a great life in prison. Give us an idea of what is it like in a South African prison.
Yeah, I think if you ask people who were there or who are there, they will not respond the same. I think it's important to realize that people are not in a correctional facility to, be penalized or to have a secondary type of punishment. But they are punished, therefore they are in a correctional facility, and it's clear in the Correctional Services Act that those who are in a correctional facility, we need to rehabilitate them for the time they are in a facility, and therefore we need to provide those programs. It is a legal mandate, and I think the perception that, what the viewers are saying, it might be that from a distance, but surely inside it is not exactly the same.
The viewers are saying, yes, our prisons have become a university for criminals to become better criminals. How do you view that kind of idea that our criminals are not being rehabilitated and the programs are not working?
I think, again, those perceptions might be there, but we have a number of very good stories where people were inside our facilities and they are never coming back to our institutions, and you will never read of them. You will read of those who fall back and who offended society again. And I think we need also to celebrate the successes in this process and obviously regret the fallbacks, but there are successes, and I think as we are continuing with the rehabilitation path, there are even more and more successes.
Mr. Smallberger, let's talk about the lifers here. The lifers are causing all the consternation in prison right now. They're challenging the minister for what they call delays in their parole application. Talk to us about that, but also talk to us about this idea that you automatically should get parole after 25 years.
Yeah, thank you. I think, firstly, I must indicate that the current Correctional Services Act, which is effective from 1 October 2004, any person serving a life sentence since that date need to serve a minimum of 25 years before becoming eligible to be considered for parole. But on 15 July 2011, there was a High Court judgment in Pretoria where the North Gauteng High Court have ruled that all lifers who were serving a sentence before 1 October 2004 need to be treated according to the policies that were applicable before that date. And before that date, the minimum detention period for lifers were 20 years, meaning that there was also another stipulation which is not currently in the Correctional Services Act, the previous Correctional Services Act, Section 22, capital A, which offenders could have, for good behavior, earned credits. And that credits could have been one-third of their sentence, meaning that you will deduct that from the sentence to determine the eligible period. Now, for a lifer, if you take 20 years, it means that the credits that he or she could earn is 6 years and 8 months. So you deduct now that from the 20 years, the 6 years and 8 months, and then it's 13 years and 4 months. And also in the meantime, there was also a special remission of sentence by the State President in October 2012, which granted them another 6 months. And then there was a court ruling in 2016 to say that the 6-month special remission of 2005 need also to be granted to lifers. That means, in short, that the initial period for consideration came from 20 years now to 12 years and 4 months, meaning that what you would normally present it to lifers over a 20-year period, it need to be squeezed in now in just more than 12 years. And let me also say to the listeners, we have currently more than 14,000 lifers. And in the Van Wyk judgment, it's basically affecting 4,668 offenders, of which I can analyze to give a more detail in terms of an explanation where we are currently.
What does your research say about lifers, but also serious crimes committed by criminals and that get parole, the rate of reoffending? How big is the rate of reoffending in South Africa?
The rate of reoffending is a very general question. Maybe whilst we are discussing lifers, I can maybe just focus on lifers for now.
Yeah.
From those 4,600 lifers under the Van Wyk judgment, where Minister have already considered, and the previous Minister up to date, more than 1,400. Of that 1,400, just about 300 were released till to date.
Yeah.
And from those 300, there's a very small number that have transgressed and reoffend and where we have revoked the parole, and it's less than 10. Meaning that those lifers, and I think we need to emphasize also that...
So it's less than 3%?
It's very low for lifers. And I think we need to also, lifers is a special category of offenders, meaning that it's not, your daily crimes. They have committed serious crimes, and, the time that they're spending, some of them are really making use of the opportunities and grabbing the opportunities and take it the second chance in life. Some of them are studying, some are doing their degrees, honors degrees, master's degrees, and we have also lifers who are doing their PhDs, meaning that when we release them, they are more empowered to face society, and society play also a vital role to accept them back in society and make sure that, they are reintegrating well into society.
So you would say, with regards to those lifers in prison, the rehabilitation programs are quite effective, and the long time they spent in helps with the rehabilitation.
We will definitely say that. I think the Minister Masuta, in his press briefing on the 29th of June, he also alluded to the same factors. And what we also want to say at this point in time, that the incidents that you are reflecting on your screens about the incident at Kgoshi-Mampuru on Sunday, you know, by closer investigation, it's been found that some of the instigators are even not in this category. Some of them are only eligible 20, 30, and some of them are even not serving life sentences. So, you know, offenders sometimes also use opportunities and to attract attention, but we want to encourage them to comply with all the rules and regulations, so to prove to society that they are indeed ready for release. And we have put special measures in place to make sure that we can make sure that the backlog that is currently existing, that we can attend to them, and there are task teams who are focusing on this, and we will make sure that we don't unnecessarily delay their considerations.
Well, Mr. Smallberger, thank you very much for coming in. We've run out of time. There's a lot of issues still we can talk about, but thank you for coming in and clearing up the issue around the riots in the prison with regards to the issue of the video that you've seen on screen. That was, of course, a video that was handed exclusively to us here at SABC News. This is Mr. James Smallberger. He's the Chief Deputy Commissioner for Incarceration and Correction at the Department of Correctional Services here in South Africa. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, of course, we're asking you for our question of the day. Some of you think that prison's a holiday in South Africa. Do prisoners have too many rights? Well, let's see what you, our viewers, think about this question. Yes, some of them, prison is their second home, says Atini Mbena. Lechasa treats us free education, free KFC, I don't know about that. Luxury bedding, I don't know about that. Cell phones allowed, gaining weight, they are on holidays, not jail. As mentioned, Lechasa, have you been there, my friend? Barry Martin says, prisoners in this country have too many rights because our Constitution protects and allows them to commit more crimes. But Barry, the Constitution is a living document and it can be changed by the will of the people. That is us. All of us have the same rights. We move on. We'll talk to Mr. Miles Boodoo after the break. But right now, let's have a look at what's happening on our Facebook page. The High Court in Johannesburg will today rule on a South African National Editors Forum SANEF application for an interdict against Black First Land First. Then we also see that Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane says most stakeholders have accepted the new mining charter. He was speaking during a visit to illegal mining sites in Limpopo. And finally, at least 3 people worldwide are affected with totally untreatable superbug strains of gonorrhea, which they are likely to be spreading to others through sex. That's according to the WHO. Yes, all of this, a very concerning one, that all of this and others on our Facebook page. That's where you find it. That's where you interact with us as well. Time for us to take a break. When we come back, we'll escalate the discussion around what is happening in our prisons. Don't miss it.
Being orphaned at an early age propelled him to better heights.
When I was 16, my mother passed away, and I had no choice than to find work, and I had to juggle work between work and school. I've worked on different coffee shops, and eventually in 2012, I started my own business called Cities Brew.
Laying good business acumen since childhood nurtured her good standing.
I happened to grow up in a family where my father is a businessman. And as a businessman, he used to have lots of friends from different parts of the world. Business, you need to be committed. You need to live it. You need to love it. You need to be there, at the moment.
For more inspiring stories, stay tuned to Bophelong every Friday.
Let's continue our discussion then. Lifers who are eligible to be considered for parole say that they are being ignored by the authorities. A memorandum of grievances circulated between lifers at various prisons across the country has now been submitted to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services. the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Correctional Services, and the National Council of Correctional Services. Activists are now calling on inmates to rise for their right to parole. Now, for more on this story, we are now joined by Golden Miles Budu from the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights. Mr. Budu, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
First and foremost, before we get to the issue of the lifers, you are a former inmate, an activist, as well as a spokesperson for the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights. Just give us a brief background in terms of what your organization does.
Well, the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights was established in 1988 while I was doing time for an offense which was then called redistribution of the country's wealth. Nowadays, they call it affirmative shopping. We started the organization, and I was released in 1991, and I'm holding on. And if prisons were holidays, if prisons were hotels, I was going to walk away from it a long time ago. It's 26 years now, and I'm holding on because these institutions were, in fact, adopted from the previous prison department to correctional services. And the brutality has been done away with. What is happening now, it's just a wasteland of human beings where people just go there and waste away, come out worse criminals, and coming and intimidating and victimizing the very same taxpayers who are keeping them up whilst they are doing their time.
So what you are suggesting, there is no rehabilitation?
There shall not be any rehabilitation until such time the system itself get transformed, reformed, and rehabilitated. You cannot rehabilitate a person who has broken the law, yet you yourself has broken the law. You were never arrested, and in fact, you are getting away with murder, and it is business as usual. And rehabilitation is supposed to be investment, to invest in education, in training and skills development. You will then get to the product which is called rehabilitation, and after that you will have to reintegrate a rehabilitated product. In other words, a product that must be monitored in terms of useful citizen, law-abiding citizen, and a productive citizen. Monitor it, evaluate it, and if it doesn't work, enforce. It does not happen. It has not been happening for the past 20-something years after my imprisonment.
Now, what you are saying is completely different from what our viewers are suggesting, because we are asking the question, do prisoners have too many rights in prison? And they are suggesting that KFC, free education, free television, free everything, health and all the rights that a prisoner should have, and that is too much.
Elvis, they ain't got no idea what they're talking about. You see, those who are saying that it's one of two things.
And of course, I forget free strippers as well.
It's either one, they were never to a hotel, let alone a 5-star hotel, or they have never been to prison. They don't know what they're talking about. You know, if it comes to the strippers, we were very angry right from the beginning, and after a few days we've calmed down and we read between the lines. And then we realized that this was a power struggle between correctional officers down there fighting with management, having to use ignorant, you know, small kids who were excited to just go in there and perform. Factionalism, body factionalism has now moved from party politics into the correctional services, and it's going to spread like a cancer.
Let's go back to the very important story, and that is the lifers. What are your concerns regarding the lifers?
Well, the Deputy Commissioner Smallburger has articulated the act, have articulated the sub-acts and so forth. I need not to repeat them. It's the implementation thereof that is not implemented, because you now have a parole board, of a civilian parole board. There are 52, 53 of them countrywide. And we wonder, and we're still wondering, whether those parole officers, do they get the proper training to understand how delicate and sensitive this release policy has come to be? You know, at least you must be able to count minus, plus, divide, and multiply in order to understand how it works. It was made very, very complicated coming from where it was. In the past, you used to get 4 months off a year if you were a first-time offender. And whatever you remain with, it's like you will have to behave. If you don't behave, they then reintroduce what they have deducted from your sentence. It was a very straightforward and simple release policy. And then the new system came, and then they started to use maths, started to use science. And we are very challenged when it comes to maths and science, by the way.
Is it your contention, though, that prisoners are being treated not fairly, especially when it comes to parole?
Well, look, the former Minister of Communications, Faith Mtambu, she said something about this 2-3 days in her office as an acting Minister of Correctional Services and Justice. And it was repeated and reiterated by the minister, and the minister said, no, they will start a task team to investigate the parole system. And in fact, Justice Abraham, I think he is still on the bench. He had a scathing attack on the parole system in 2011. You know, he said the system doesn't work, and then they come with this VOD, victim-offender dialogue, where the offender will have to face the victim and be apologetic and show remorse. And sometimes you find that the victim has left the countries outside the borders of South Africa, and then they use that to prolong the stay of an inmate further in incarceration. And then the next moment they come and complain about overcrowding and understaffed. But that is about to come to an end, Elvis, because we are rubbing shoulders with a newly formed public sector union, where we're going to work together, called the South African Liberated Public Sector Workers Union, SALIPSO, that is headed by Thobile Ntola, the former president of SACTU. Yes. We are rubbing shoulders. We are going to work, having a working relationship where a union and organization will make sure that the system works right from the day you get arrested, you get charged, you get prosecuted and imprisoned. And we are very excited about that.
Now, you were recently quoted, and I quote, prisoners across the country should rise to the occasion despite the Correctional Services Department sending in a team with the alleged intention to kill the protesting inmates who are fighting for their basic human rights. So what are some of those, close quote by the way, what are some of those basic rights that you're referring to?
Elvis, you know what? I've been here long enough to be able to articulate those rights from the top of my head. You know, Chapter 2 of the Bill of Rights, Section 35, subsection 2, paragraph E, is very, very explicit when it comes to the rights of people who are in detention, those who are sentenced, and those who are unsentenced. It says that each and every person who is in detention, including sentence offenders, do have a right to be incarcerated in conditions which are conducive to human dignity, with exercise at least, and at the state's provision, proper nutrition, proper accommodation, reading material, and medical attention. That is what we are holding on, because it is a constitutional prerogative, and we don't have the monies to go to court every time to say these rights have been violated by the Department of Correctional Services.
Mr. Boodoo, I thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
You're welcome, Elvis. It's
that
a pleasure.
Was Golden Miles Boodoo from the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights. So remember that we're asking you that question. What do you make of it? Do you think that prisoners have got too many rights in South Africa? We'll take a look at your comments in a short while. But right now, it's time to go to the Sports Focus with Eben and Kendall.
Yeah, thank you, Elvis. I'm with Kendall here. Myself and Kendall, we're both kind of feeling a bit melancholic about the Proteas and how they capitulated yesterday a little bit. They looked a little bit rudderless and leaderless, shall I say that, towards the end of the day?
Look, captaincy is not as easy as one makes it out to be. Dean Elgar might be a capable captain. I think he needed a little more experience before walking in at Lord's to lead South Africa against England. Yeah,
I think there are better candidates in that team to captain them. The guys who've captained the team before, Hashim Amla was there, JP Dumini's captained the team before. I found it a very questionable decision, although it's early days. I must say, though, that the discipline of the bowlers was really the only guy that comes out with his head held high is Vern. I think Kagiso, I was disappointed in him, especially because Kagiso has had a noble problem now for more than a year, and he's not addressing it. Morne has had a noble problem his entire career, and for a left-arm spinner to bowl a no ball is just inexcusable.
One of the things that really stood out is exactly what you're talking about the ill discipline that the bowlers showed. Even a slow bowler, a spin bowler, overstepping the mark as well. That's something that's a no-go. But you know what, even a lot of people have picked up that Rabat was falling off.
Yeah.
And if we were picking it up here at home, what's happening in the team? Why is the analyst in the team not picking it up?
I had a conversation with him before they left with Kagiso himself, and he gets quite prickly when you talk to him about technical stuff. You know, I spoke to him about bowling the Yorker. I said to him, you've got the best Yorker in the game, why don't you use it more? And he was quite prickly. Oh, who am I to tell him what to do, kind of thing. And of course, it was all friendly banter, but it kind of shows whether you are prepared to accept information, new information. So, listen, I think a lot of this have to be put at the door of the bowling coach, because it's how you practice. And it's the kind of discipline that you put in. And Charles Langeveld, he's a lovely guy. He's a great bowling coach, but maybe he's a little bit soft with the group and allow them to bowl in the nets the way they like.
Yeah, and I think I think that might well be the case, because surely Charles Langeveld can see everything that everybody else saw, that these guys are not quite getting it right. It's only Vernie who's coming in and hitting his straps. Yeah. And Joe Root came in, got stuck in. He had a great partnerships with Stokes and then with Ali. Yeah. And it seems as if it's going to be a little more difficult this morning when they go back in.
Well, you know, got a fairly new ball this morning. I think Vernon's going to nick a couple out again today. I hope he gets on the honours board. Let's hope we can bowl him out for under 450 and then score big and maybe not win this game, but, you know, save the game, because he's got a great record at Lords, and I'm still hopeful.
Yeah, 4 out of 5. We want to keep that going. Make it 5 out of 6.
5 out of 6. Let's hope that's the case. Let's go over to Tsietsi Monari for the weather now.
Hello there, welcome from the weather desk. Well, South Africa is expecting a bit of a cold weekend, especially starting with Saturday evening. But for now, clear skies for the southwestern parts, and no rainfall is expected for the Western Cape province, despite that cold front that's making steadfast and headway towards the Western Cape province. A bit of rain coming up towards Limpopo province and covering that eastern side of Botswana, up north into Zimbabwe, and definitely towards the DRC. There you should expect some good chance of rainfall over the next couple of days. Like I said, with the cold front approaching, you should start seeing some rainfall towards the Western Cape province starting with tomorrow. And temperatures are looking pretty good for now, especially for all those that are going to be along Port Elizabeth and much of the Eastern Cape province, and even towards KwaZulu-Natal. We're seeing upper 20s right across the Western Cape province and some parts of the Eastern Cape, of course. PE at the 32, 25 for Durban, and 24 for all those that are going to be in Polokwane. The western side of SADC regions are expected to be quite chilly. And for all those that are going to be in Namibia, do expect Windhoek at only 21 degrees, 24 for Maun, and 24 for all those that are going to be in Harare. Nice and warm weather for Nampula. In fact, quite a lovely day is expected there. Temperatures at 31 degrees and possibilities of showers, like I mentioned earlier on, for Harare and for all those that are going to be in the central part of Zimbabwe. Partly cloudy skies coming up for Antananarivo, and it drops all the way now to 18 degrees, so nice and chilly there. 29 for Moroni, Victoria 32, a fine day coming up for Port Louis with sunny skies for the majority of the day. 27 Kigali and Kampala, a bit of rain for those that are going to be in Juba, Banjul, possibly towards Libreville as well. Partly cloudy skies and a good build-up of rainfall. So lots of moisture expected along the equator. And you'll see, as usual, West Africa as well sees a good chance of rainfall for Nigeria, for Liberia, maybe going as far as Gambia. The rest towards the eastern side, yeah, there is a shade of rainfall there. But you know it's quite dry along the east. We're not really expecting much rainfall. We're never that hopeful. But it looks like there will be some storms along the southern part of Sudan. And again, 30% chance of rainfall towards Nigeria as usual. A bit more rainfall coming up along those parts. 36 for Cairo, 32 for Tripoli, 40 for Agadez. And finally, just to leave it with West Africa, you'll see hot weather for Niamey, Bamako, and all the way towards Abidjan. That's why I leave it for the weather. Stay tuned for more later.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, it's gone 10 o'clock Central African time, wherever you are on the continent, Middle East. This is the Newsroom show. We'll be with you, myself and Kendall, for the next hour.
100%. We've got a whole lot planned for you for today's show. Quite a lot from the news, as well as a quick look at the Garcia report, but more about that a little later.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. Kendall will take us through the corruption report in FIFA. Interesting one. But, of course, today we're asking you the prisoner question. We've seen lots of what they call dicey behavior in our prisons. We've seen, well, exotic dances in our prisons. We've seen riots in our prisons, attacks on wardens in our prisons, and so forth. And now life prisoners, well, they want better treatment as well. So do they have too many rights in our prisons? We're asking you here in South Africa. What are the viewers telling us?
Well, Dipansu said prisoners are on Facebook and Twitter updating daily, using their phones to organize more criminal acts. Prisons are resorts.
Well, that is the perception that's out there. I spoke to the department and they say, no, that's not the case. Lechasa says, they are living a better life than me. Free education, free meal, luxury bedding. Ish, South Africa says, Lechasa.
Gustav says they have the right to food, water, medical care and be treated with dignity despite the crime, but certainly not to be entertained by strippers.
Yep. Perception, though, is half of it, isn't it? And the perception amongst all of you is out there is that prison life is easy life here in South Africa. Also, the big story that's developing here in South Africa in the last 24 hours is, of course, the apology by B-Pottinger about this is the British public relations firm around their dealings here in South Africa. We're asking you, of course, the DA is putting forward that, well, all dealings should be disclosed. We're asking you, our viewers, should this actually be the case, Kendall? More than 300 votes in already?
Yeah, no, it's getting a lot of traction, this particular poll. 90% of our 303 votes are saying yes, B-Pottinger should reveal all dealings.
And that stayed 90% the whole day. Interesting. Dipansu tweets us, says, yes, they should. Their apology is weak compared to the damage caused.
And Julie Robertson says, yes, B-Pottinger must disclose all dealings with the Guptas.
Atini Mbena says to us, our country is not a spaza shop. They must be forced to disclose everything involving that monopoly family. Interesting choice of words there. Anyhow, keep tweeting us on that question of the day. Of course, we're also asking a sports question. It's Friday. It could be the last day that the Kings play Super Rugby. They're playing the Bulls this weekend, and they could be out. But they've really been a team that's stolen the hearts in South Africa this year.
They've been an absolute revelation and doing exactly what it is we're expecting from the hotbed of South African cricket and rugby amongst the black people of this country. And, you know, the question that we're asking our viewers is, do the Kings deserve to be dropped from Super Rugby?
Well, Kabi Sontuli says to us, I don't think so. There are things that need to be sorted out in this Eastern Cape side. Definitely.
Zalton Jafta says, no way, Jose. EP Kings is the best performing side in South African rugby. Give the guys a break. Stop killing rugby in the EC.
Yeah, hopefully what will happen... No, the Kings should not drop, says Lechasa. Hopefully what will happen is if they are dropped, they give an opportunity to go play in Europe in some of the other big pound-making competitions. And maybe that's the boost that Eastern Cape Rugby will need by default. But I also don't agree that they should be dropped, but that's only my humble opinion.
Yeah, now whatever it is, they should actually be kept in major competitions to build up South African rugby.
Absolutely. Anyhow, it's a lot of work for us to get through. Let's take a look at our top stories right now. 76 police officers have been injured in clashes with protesters in Germany's city of Hamburg. This is ahead of the beginning of the G20 today. President Jacob Zuma says South Africans will use its participation in the summit to lure investors and seek ways to create more jobs. The High Court in Johannesburg will today rule on the South African National Editors Forum's application for an interdict against Black First, Land First. Those are your headlines. Let's go over to Kendall to see what's happening in sport.
Yevon, thank you very much. Good morning to you. This is what I've got planned for you in the sports today.
That's the end of proceedings on day one. And what a satisfying day it is for England's captain.
Van Niekerk goes in lane 5. A lot of eyes on South Africa.
Wade van Niekerk is looking in ominous form for the World Championships as he blasts another long-standing Michael Johnson milestone, the 400-meter meeting record in Lausanne.
Van Niekerk now begins to stride away and eats up the ground and eases away from Matwala, whose stride is shortening. Great running in 3 from Febe as Van Niekerk there takes it. 43.63. It is indeed a meeting record.
Game, Cinemat, Djokovic.
Novak Djokovic breezes through to the third round of Wimbledon with a straightforward victory over Adam Pavlicek.
6-2, 6-2, 6-1, and he got better and better.
And of course, I'll be speaking to a few choice guests about the Garcia report on FIFA and Qatar and Russia World Cups. All this and more later on. Do stay with Eben as he's got the news.
Thanks again, Kendall. Very good morning to you. Our top story and a developing story. 76 police officers have now been injured in clashes with protesters in the German port city of Hamburg, where the G20 summit starts shortly. Police have confirmed that 3 officers were taken to hospital and scores of protesters were injured. The clashes began when police charged at masked protesters at a Welcome to Hell march attended by 12,000 people. World leaders, including U.S. President Donald Trump, will discuss climate change, trade, and other major issues facing the world. Police fired water cannons and pepper spray at masked protesters who hurled bottles, stones, and flares. Now, President Jacob Zuma says South Africa will use its participation at the summit to lure investors and seek ways to create jobs. He was speaking to the SABC ahead of this 2-day meeting.
We certainly highlight the issues from the continent. We have always done so. In the last G20, Africa was discussed very positively by the G20. We'll expect that to continue because we believe the problems of the continent and challenges are well known. And we believe that our being here, in a sense, although we are not members because we represent Africa, but in another sense we do because we are the African country understanding the challenges of the continent. So we are happy that on the agenda there is a session that will deal with the matters of Africa.
Now, our acting political editor, Mzwandile Mbeche, is in Hamburg traveling with the president. He's now going to give us an update on what is happening there. Very good morning to you as well. Just give us a quick overview. We see protests, but what's happening?
All right. Welcome to Hamburg, where the G20 world leaders have gathered for a very important summit, the summit on the G20. This summit is primarily about looking at the economic issues that affect the world. But I tell you, the geopolitical issues have really taken over. You know that today we are hoping to see leaders really come up with one united message to try and save the world from this poor state of the economy. But the geopolitical issues like the US and Russia have really taken center stage here. Everyone is looking forward to the first meeting between President Donald Trump of the United States and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. So it will be very interesting to see how that meeting will proceed. And we continue to see other world leaders streaming into Hamburg. And then they want really to push this message that despite the fact that one of the most powerful members of the G20, the United States, is taking a posture of being isolationist, but they want to make sure that as a collective they are able perhaps to persuade the US to really see the way other countries are seeing. You remember that after the climate change agreement was signed in Paris, the US decided no, they are not going to ratify it, and then they made it clear, perhaps Donald Trump made it clear that his interest was America first. So, and then we've seen also the British vote in about 2 years to say, you know what, we're going for Brexit, so which basically means they are leaving the EU. So that really presents new kinds of challenges to this global environment. You remember one of the main reasons G20 was formed was specifically to bring all these powerful nations together so that when there are issues that arise, they are able to tackle them with a united voice, particularly the issues of the economy. But if you look at what is happening currently, there isn't really much hope that they would be able to come with that voice. Indeed, South Africa also arrived yesterday, President Zuma leading the delegation. He says despite all these issues that are afflicting the world, he wants to make sure that the agenda of Africa is not derailed, because you'd remember that South Africa is the only member of the G20. But of course, there are those who get invited because they represent certain institutions like the chairperson of the AU and the chairperson of NEPAD. So you can see it's a mixed bag issues that would be discussed here. And I can just add that last night they were running battles, and even the night before that one. So people here, or the protesters, are complaining to say, you know what, these kinds of meetings don't yield anything in terms of tangible actions. So it's just talking and talking. That is why you've been seeing civil society really trying to say, to make its voice heard. But the security has really been beefed up. So it's really difficult to move around because of fear of protests, which have said, you know what, so they are sick and tired of these summits because these summits don't yield anything. So, yes, as we go forward, we'll really be looking forward to what is it that these leaders will agree upon, because at the end of the day, the world has to be a better place, and they know that they carry that responsibility.
Well, thank you very much, Zwai, for that update. That's our acting political editor, Mzwandile Mbeja, coming to you live from Hamburg in northern Germany. Of course, our president is there, and the summit will, well, officially be opened a little bit later today. But there are lots of concerns. Let me introduce our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena. Morning to you, Sophie. Thanks for being with us.
Morning, morning.
Interesting what's happening. Are you surprised with all the protests that we are seeing?
I'm not. It was expected. You recall that during the G8 summit, the same happened because of perhaps currently the issue of the United States of America, the president of United States of America, Donald Trump, his pronouncement, his policies, and how he has acted since he took office. It was expected that we are likely to see a more robust protest. They do happen every time there's a gathering like this, your G20 gathering. Yeah. But clearly this time around, Donald Trump must take a blame.
I just want to point out to our viewers that those pictures are live. The pictures you're seeing incoming are live. These are the protesters on the one side in one of the main streets in Hamburg, and you see the massive police and military deployment on the other side as they protest, of course, against what they call, well, making or threatening world peace. That's what the G20 is doing. And Sophie, when we talk about threatening world peace and threatening the future of the planet, it really is about protectionist policies by the likes of America and pulling out of climate deals that's causing all this consternation.
Let's talk about the world peace. Currently, you are aware that at the Korean Peninsula there is tension. You are aware that DPKR, that is North Korea and America, are likely to fight there. And people are concerned that something must be done to ensure that the two countries don't finally end up fighting in that peninsula. And it will affect South Korea, it will affect China. And different countries have taken different sides. You have Russia taking sides with DPKR. You have China seemingly trying to support Korea and also America. Therefore, there is that kind of a tension that is threatening the world peace. You also have Syria. The Middle East is a problem. And we are aware that Donald Trump, since he took office, he has threatened to kind of clamp down on Syria, and the president of Syria is not budging, and you have Russia taking side with Syria. Therefore, the world peace is indeed threatened.
This meeting at the G20, there's a special meeting set between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. Donald Trump is flying in through Poland because he doesn't want to spend too much time here. But this meeting is really important to sort out the future of the Korean Peninsula, isn't it?
Yes, indeed, it is quite important. I think China can play an important role to try and bring stability there. But another very, very, very important meeting, because when you look at Syria, Russia is involved. When you look at the peninsular tension, you also have Russia in the midst. Donald Trump is expected to meet with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, for the first time since the elections in 2016, and where Russia was fingered in terms of interfering with the elections there. Therefore, all eyes will be on this meeting. Earlier on, let's take a look at what Donald Trump had to say on his Twitter account this morning about this important meeting, and let's check that message.
Let's take that message. Here we have a live picture of Vladimir Putin arriving for the opening of the G20 summit. But where's that tweet? It'd be interesting to say, because Donald Trump really speaks via Twitter, and the Americans are very fearful of what a picture with Vladimir Putin could do for the outlook in America, or how Trump is perceived in his own country.
Let's.
We can't find that tweet right now, Sophie, unfortunately. But I want to talk to you about the work that South Africa has to do now at the summit. There we have it. There we have it. I will represent our country well and fight for its interests. Fake news media will never cover me accurately, is what he says, of course. And he says,
I look forward to all meetings today with world leaders, including my meeting with Vladimir Putin. Much to discuss.
Well, we saw Vladimir Putin is there. Donald Trump will, we saw him arrive. Donald Trump will arrive a little bit later today. It really is that important meeting for the world. It is indeed. But Sophie, Jacob Zuma talks about jobs and investment as his focus going to the G20 summit. Is it possible? Is it real? Is it?
South Africa will try its best to try and market the country and the continent, but unfortunately, currently, the global issues are dominating the meeting. You see the protest. I mean, they're drowning everything that's likely to happen there. And Donald Trump's presence, obviously, is going to dominate the news. Russia's presence, Vladimir Putin, you saw him arriving. It's going to be the main issues, the global politics and geopolitics, because clearly we are seeing a new world order developing. The other interesting issue to monitor is Canada and France. Youngest leader for the first time attending this meeting as leaders of respective countries. And France has already indicated that they are going to push the climate agreement to be implemented by all member states of the G20. But we know very well Donald Trump has pulled out of the Paris Agreement. America first. America for the Americans.
America only, he says at the moment, as we see more international leaders arriving there. That looked like King Fahd from Saudi Arabia, who also just walked into the main convention hall there in Hamburg in northern Germany. But Sophie, Africa, is this the worst time to be taking African issues to the summit then? And what are the issues do you think that Africa should be putting forward through the guise of South Africa?
I think what Africa should do at this moment, this is an ideal moment for us as Africans to position ourselves in terms of us working together to strengthen the continental body, that is the AU, and doing business amongst ourselves, Africa intra-trade, and also developing the regions on the continent. And we must become a powerful force, so that when we go to these kind of multilateral fora or platform, we go there as a united force, but also putting Africa first and positioning ourselves as an alternative place where people can do business. Because we are more stable, we are more focused rather than the West currently is in tatters.
And also, I think Africa can be a place of peace and an agent of peace in this increasingly dangerous world.
Yes, indeed. We have credibility. We've been through a lot of trying times and challenges. We can be able to unite the world. We can take a decision to stand for peace. We have leaders who have demonstrated that before, and they can do it even now.
Sophie, thank you very much for joining us. Sophie will give us insight and updates on what's happening at the G20 summit. Yes, we're living in a very dangerous world at the moment. Continuous pronouncements around armament and war being made, especially on the Korean Peninsula, but also in places like Syria. That's really been a hotspot. Thank you, Sophie. You can stay on the channel. Sophie will keep us updated as to what is happening and what other things we should be looking out for with regards to the G20 summit today, over the weekend, and well into next week. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, Kendall will be looking at the Garcia report into corrupt activities with regards to world football, FIFA in particular. Don't miss that.
And giving an update on all leading stories.
You see South Africa has a yellow palette which indicates a warning color on this index.
We are first to give market updates.
And the more the currency is under pressure, also our costs go up.
We always give you the best guests to keep you informed and sharpen you for the day ahead.
You got to find something people are willing to pay for, that they need now, and they have the money to pay for it. The minute you tick those three boxes, you're in business.
Sports Roundup to fill you in.
985 is not the end. For me, it's going faster than the 985 and keep improving the record.
Never start your day without Morning Live if you need a perfect dress guide for the day.
Parts of KZN into Kokstad, we're seeing those 4 patches. Please drive carefully.
Set the agenda for the day with Morning Live.
Phones, cloud systems and robots have taken over a lot of what used to be done manually.
Our accounting system is actually based on the cloud.
Google nowadays can tell you where you parked your car.
And Africa's entrepreneurs are using technology to create.
With Pocket Masipala, you can basically do all the services that you would do at the municipality physically by going there, but you can now do them on a mobile app.
Join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Sundays at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
Good morning, welcome back. A little earlier we promised to be bringing you news about the Garcia report, the one about the Qatar and Russia. Well, after years of speculation and mystery, the report into the bidding and voting processes for Russia 2018 and Qatar 2022 World Cups has finally been released. The Garcia report, which examines allegations of high-level corruption in the world of football, was finally released by FIFA after its hand was forced by a leak about a week ago. Now, German newspaper Bild claimed to have acquired a copy of the document, prompting the governing body to release the report produced by American lawyer Michael Garcia. Maria Claudia Rojas of FIFA's Ethics Committee Investigatory Chamber and Vasilios Skouris of the Adjudicatory Chamber were behind the decision to finally release this report with the backing of the new president, Gianni Infantino. A statement on FIFA's official website said that for the sake of transparency, they were welcoming the news that the report had finally been published, albeit not by them first. Now, to carry the story a little bit further, we're now joined on Skype from the UK by Martin Ziegler, the chief sports reporter of The Times in the UK. And thank you so much for giving us this time, Martin.
Good morning. How are you doing, Kendall?
No, very good. And very glad to be speaking to one of the key people into the breaking of this report in the first place. The report that we've just seen, that we've been looking at for a few days now, is it as explosive as was expected?
Actually, I don't think it was. I think there was a bit of a disappointment, certainly from some people who thought this was going to be the smoking gun that led to the World Cup being taken away from Qatar. That just didn't happen. Actually, what we saw from the report was it was very much similar to the brief findings that had been revealed about in 2014. So actually, as far as Qatar is concerned, more embarrassment, more negative publicity, but nothing definitive which said this should be stripped from that country.
Now, all along it seemed as if Hans-Joachim Eckert was instrumental in holding back the report. Was that the case, or was somebody else at FIFA blocking the release, in your mind?
Well, yes, it certainly, there was no appetite either from the former FIFA executive, the former president, Sepp Blatter, or the ethics judge, Judge Eckert, to release this. I think perhaps this might have been to save the blushes of various members who came out of it very negatively. But I think once there was a new president with Infantino taking over, that made a big difference. And what we then saw was all the people who were named, most of them have actually either left the organisation, or they've been charged, or they've been indicted. So there was nothing to lose for Infantino to publish this.
Now, one of the things that came out, at least that might be a little embarrassing and not say blushing, were David Cameron and Prince William were implicated in an attempted deal to swap votes with South Korea. If this is ever verified as fact, what will the expected consequences be for them?
Well, I don't think there will be any consequences for them. England were very, very open. They provided all the emails, all the interviews with Garcia. So there's a huge amount of detail about England's bid. And it is certainly embarrassing for David Cameron and Prince William. Prince William is the president of the Football Association, that they were there when there was a vote trading deal agreed with Korea. And they were in the hotel room at the time. So, of course, that's very embarrassing for them. But in terms of repercussions, I think there won't be any. Garcia did not recommend any. In fact, he actually gave some praise to England for being very open. So I think it's another one which is filed under the list of embarrassing but no action.
Well, bring it home for South African viewers and others from the continent. What is the import for South Africa from this report? Danny Jordan, for example, what's the import for him, as well as Nelson Mandela? Does the report say anything about what Nelson Mandela was asked to do?
Yeah, I mean, there are some references to what happened with Nelson Mandela. He was asked to provide backing, which was for World Cup bids, which was obviously a very important thing for all the bidding countries. And there is also some suggestions that some of the people bidding for the 2018 and 2022 championships tried to make political capital out of South Africa, because they were the hosts of the 2010 World Cup, of course. So using people from South Africa to perhaps back their bid and try and get the African FIFA members to support them.
Right. Now, you mentioned something a little earlier which makes me have to ask you this question. Jack Warner has called the objectivity of this report into question, and I think he might have been speaking to you in one of your reports where he certainly made references to how everything was par for the course. He had never asked for anything that had not been asked for before. What do you make of what Jack Warner has said? Martin, are you still with us? Well, Martin, we seem to have lost that link with Martin Ziegler, the chief sports reporter of the Times UK, one of the original journalists to break the FIFA scandal so many years ago, joining us by Skype from London. We'll try and see if we can hook up with him again. But in the meantime, I need to introduce our other guest, Elasto Kapoweza, who joins us in studio to talk a little bit more about this matter. Good morning to you. And what do you make of what Martin was saying in terms of the fact that nothing is explosive in this report, that all of this seems to be, blushes and something to save for future reference?
Thanks. Good evening to our viewers. Great to be here. Of course, no one wants to be talking about corruption in football. We want to be talking about the other side of the game. But yeah, the beautiful game, sometimes it is marred by corruption. And look at this report now that is all of a sudden now emerged because of what happened with the Bild newspaper. Difficult to understand whether FIFA were going to go ahead and publicize the full report. But there was a summary, the 42-page summary. And if you look at the differences between the two, not so much. And one wonders, what was the hullabaloo, of actually, avoiding to publicize the whole, report. But look, there are things that have come out, Kendall, that definitely you can say, look, you might look at them in terms of maybe slowing down or as an impediment to all these officials or the executive committee that are known, to have maybe done that.
I'm going to ask you to hold that thought because I want to see what else Martin can help us with here. Martin, before we lost the connection with you, we were trying to find out from you that Jack Warner's called the objectivity of the report into question and wanted to find out from you, what do you make of those comments of his? And you said something a little earlier as well, which makes me have to ask you that question.
Yeah, so Jack Warner is completely unrepentant. He sent me a long email basically saying nothing that he did was...
All right, now it seems as if that Skype connection is really not being happy with us right now. But Martin Ziegler will be definitely carrying that conversation by email. I'll make sure that I get his responses to share with you next week when we talk about this again. Elasto, you were going on about something that we've all come to see now, that this report is nothing of what we expected. The 42-page summary by Eckert and Garcia's 402-page report, not much difference in that, and we don't know what the hullabaloo was all about. So what is this about? I mean, surely there was something that we missed, maybe?
Not really. We all thought that, look, this report that has come now in full, maybe it was going to lead to a rerun or revote of the Qatar bid, especially, Russia, it was always going to be impossible, given the time frame that now is 2017, only 12 months to go until the World Cup in Russia. But you look at the Qatar bid, yes, we were hoping that maybe, it could lead to a rerun, but nothing to be found in terms of wrongdoing on the side of Qatar to warrant any rerun or revote of those World Cup bids.
What do you mean, talking about Russia and how little information came out about Russia's bid? What do you make of the fact that Russia's defense was, we can't give you any hard drives, we can't give you any documents, we can't give you any computers because, we leased them from this company that destroyed them. What do you make? Is that disingenuous of Russia? And is it derelict of FIFA to not pursue that even further?
Yeah, it's the Russians, and they know how to do it. Look, there's no way that such a bid, you cannot have some tracing of some sort of documents that exchanged hands, emails. It leaves a lot more to be desired in terms of how everything happened. But yes, Russia say, look, no wrongdoing. But if you look at so many trips to Russia of top executive, members of FIFA, some of them can't even make a relocation of what actually happened to say that, look, we were in Russia. They can't tell you that. So you can see there are a lot of things that are just being shoved under the carpet. And such has been the world of FIFA.
Look, I think some people might not know that the particular company that leased these computers to Russia for their bid is owned by Abramovich, the owner of Chelsea Football Club. But that's just an aside for a piece of information that you might use or don't use. Do you think FIFA, though, should be going hard after Russia, for example, with regards to the fact that they have used this excuse, should be finding other ways to find an understanding of how they got their bid?
Yeah, Kendo, the problem is the investigation. This was an internal investigation from Garcia, internal investigation. There are other investigations happening that led to arrest. You look at the FBI in America, you look at the Swiss investigation as well under Michael Lobra. So these ones for me are more credible than the ones that would have happened internally, because look, FIFA is investigating itself. Who is able to cooperate? Some of these executive members, they are not able to bring information that can help maybe to arrest or to some undoing that happened. So it's difficult for the likes of Garcia to have come up with a conclusive report.
Elasto, I think you hit the nail on the head right there, calling it internal, and that there's some more other serious investigations. The Swiss, the U.S. Department of Justice, as well as most recently the French have opened their own investigation, and it remains to be seen what happens to that. Is there any link between Garcia saying he's not interested in what Eckert had released, that summary that he released, and then subsequently the U.S. Justice Department coming after everybody that was linked with all sorts of corruption from years before? Because people will remember that Garcia is from the U.S. Justice system from before he joined FIFA.
Some might have said sour grapes. Remember, United States was going strong against Qatar, and they lost in the last round of voters, 14-8. You know, Qatar getting 14, United States getting 8, and straight away you could see the investigation started. You know, Garcia, of course, being American, and after that, subsequent to that, arrests started coming from the FBI. So you can see there's a link. And you look at also England as well, you know, where they lost the bid, you know, to Russia. A huge outcry coming from England. But look at this report again. It doesn't, you know, actually, you know, kind of shed aside what England did.
Elasto, thank you very much for that. I think I'm going to ask you to stick around a little bit longer, because I think there's a whole lot more we can cover still, especially since we've got another guest that we're going to be speaking to after this short break. From it's Andy Brown from the sports initiative, and I'll be chatting to him after this short break. Make sure that you stay with us. We're talking about the Garcia report, talking about the Qatar and Russia World Cups and how they got their bids. And stay with us. You're watching Newsroom.
And poverty did not deter Mpumi's success.
Being an orphan or coming from poverty or having seen what HIV and AIDS does to a person that you love takes nothing away from you. It means that you are part of a selective few who have had to face a very, very marginalized struggle.
Abuse is a lonely journey that needs compassion.
I came across as a very confident, ambitious person, but behind that mask was somebody who had serious anxiety problems, a person who had knots in their stomach continuously, a person who could be in company and would feel very lonely.
Being away from his birth country did not stop his hunger to succeed.
Boxing was the way out. Turning professional would give me an income. That was the solution to the problems I've had for so many years.
For more inspiring stories, join Bupalong every Friday at 17:30.
Right, welcome back. We're talking Garcia report, the expected to be explosive Garcia report on Qatar and Russia getting their World Cups, and not nearly as explosive as anyone expected. Earlier on, we had a chat with Elasto Capueto, still in studio with us, as well as Martin Ziegler from The Times in the UK. Joining us also on Skype is Andy Brown, the author of Sports Integrity Initiative. Andy, good morning to you, and thanks very much for coming through. Just one thing for you, within hours of the release of the report, your Twitter site was already bulleting some of the main points coming out. What stuck out for you when you first read that report?
Well, it's the report that was basically suppressed for a very long time. And, I mean, what struck me about it is the amount of evidence that Garcia had to go through. If you consider that the Department of Justice in the US has been doing its own investigation now for about 3 years and has been bringing criminal charges against people, Garcia had to do this largely with a team on his own in a short time frame. And I'm not sure if this was a strategy by FIFA, but there was a hell of a lot of information to go through. And a hell of a lot of details. And if you look at the names named in the report, a lot of them are now facing criminal charges. And this was all tasked with, one man was tasked with doing all this. it seems a horrendous task for one person to have to do, was my initial thought.
No, that's very good. I'm glad you picked up on that point, because one of the things that we have been dealing with as the interested public and journos is the fact that it seems as if FIFA was really not interested in getting down to the nub of the mat and dealing with all the corruption. Do you think there can be any link made between FIFA choosing not to keep Joachim Eckert and the leaking of the report? All right. Once again, it seems like the broadband that we've got, that broadband connection, that fiber connection that we've got is not working as well as we'd want it to be. We're going to try and get hold of Andy Brown again just to see what else he's got to say about this FIFA report. Still with us, though, is Elasto. Elasto, here we go. Once again, first point up front that Andy makes is that it seems as if FIFA might have been trying to bury Michael Garcia under a ton of work, and with the hope that he comes out with nothing.
You don't get to get a sense that, FIFA really had this willingness to come to the bottom of the truth. Yep. It seems as if, look, maybe for the sake of the public, let's just have this investigation, but not actually having the cooperation that would have liked, maybe Garcia to come up with solid, concrete evidence that there were wrongdoings, in awarding of those 2 bids.
Let me ask you this. We've got a new president, Gianni Infantino. People will remember that Sepp Blatter got re-elected, and then 3 days later he then gave up his post because he was under so much heat. New president gets elected, Gianni Infantino. Are you expecting a cleaner, more transparent FIFA going forward, from what you've seen?
I don't have confidence from where I am. Looking at US, just about to ask Andy the question of Eckert, that was that linked, his dismissal, ousted in his post, because he had investigated Infantino, remember, for those, private jet, that he used on his trips, maybe funded by the Russians or Qatarians. So, you don't get to get that confidence that really FIFA is strong in wiping up any corrupt activities.
Do you think that it's something that I'm going to ask Andy as well as soon as we get him back on Skype? Do you think that FIFA, the investigations into FIFA need to be broadened? The scope needs to be broadened to go all the way back to 1994 when the United States was hosting the World Cup. The United States back then, most people remember, was not a soccer-playing country. In fact, they call it soccer. Most people call it football. But they were not playing football at all. And here they were hosting the showpiece of international football. Do you think it should get taken back all the way to there to see how it is that they got their rights to host?
100%. I think every bid has had its share of controversy. Yeah. It seems as if, they learn from each other. Okay, how did you do it in 1994?
Yes.
In 1998, we want to do the same. And it looks like, if you look at the whole administration of FIFA,
yeah, we'll see. It seems like it's same old. Andy, thanks very much for coming back. And Elasto, I'm with an analyst in studio, Elasto Kapoweta. We're both chatting and having a listen to your thoughts. And we're talking a little bit about, it seems like we've lost Andy again, Elasto. But you were saying that, well, please carry on.
I was saying, Kendo, that if you look at it, under Sepp Blatter, you look at the whole executive committee there, and most of them being found, to have done wrong. Look at the head himself, even banned, FIFA Sepp Blatter. Then it shows that there were just so many things happening, even way before this generation came. Hoping that, of course, we are hoping that the new administration will do things better this time.
Now, with that said, I'd like to find out from you your thoughts on Gianni Infantino and his administration. You don't seem like not anything much is going to change. It's same old, business as usual. Something similar to what Jack Warner from Trinidad and Tobago had said, saying that, he reckons that he did nothing untoward, did nothing different. He asked for the Soccer Federation from the U.S. to get to meet Barack Obama. They facilitated it. He asked for South Africa to get to meet Nelson Mandela, ailing as he was. They facilitated it. And you say they seem to learn from each other and nothing is going to change. How do we get to the point where football is clean, where the head of football, the head organization of football is clean and is administering it in a way that's going to be good for the game?
It starts there. It starts with the head of football. Sepp Blatter, definitely for me. You know, you would have seen on face value that it looks like an individual who was there for the interest of football. But if you look deeper in all the revelations that came about, not really. You look at Infantino, the fact that this report as well was not publicized, where he had to wait for the Bild newspapers to do that. I mean, again, it cast a lot of doubts on him as the leader of the greatest football board on the earth.
So do you agree that there's absolutely no smoking gun? You alluded to that as well a little early on. There's no smoking gun about anything, anywhere.
I agree, 100%. I agree, because if you look at the football officials, sometimes they're like soccer players. If it is football, where most of them, yes, do wrong, concede free kicks deliberately, get yellow cards, get red cards. Some of these officials, yes, have been red carded, and it doesn't seem to stop because they come in these positions for the wrong reasons. We want them to come and make sure that their football interests at heart, but for some of them, it's about lining their pockets, it's about increasing their empires, whether it's their personal businesses. So it's difficult. Yes, there are others that really are there to make sure that football is run properly. But a majority of those ones, definitely they've got other ulterior motives in terms of just furthering their own interests.
So now the question that I've got for you, like to bring it back home again, is there's been a lot of talk about the $10 million that South Africa parted with to the diaspora, the African diaspora, and where it came from and what it was for and what it was eventually used for and what came off it. Do you think that a proper investigation into all those matters will bring it all home, will finger the right people?
Yes, to South Africa needs to be cleared. I know that this then Sports Minister, Fikile Mbalula, came out strongly and denied any wrongdoing. Yeah, but I think, an investigation is required.
All right, now, Elasta, I'm going to ask you to just give us a quick one here. We've got him on his landline now, really keen to get his thoughts. Andy, I'm hoping that you can hear us and that we are connected. My question to you really right now would be into your thoughts around Joachim Eckert and the leaking of the report. Do you think there's any causal link between Eckert being let go and the report all of a sudden making its way into a German newspaper's hands?
Well, that's very difficult to speculate on. It could be that happened. We have no proof, and I'd be unwilling to comment without any proof of that. But it does seem very coincidental, doesn't it, that it happened that way? And it's obviously a very comprehensive examination of all of the allegations against FIFA, much more comprehensive than the report that FIFA actually published, the 42-page version, which it put out, which Garcia resigned after that was published. It's obviously a lot more comprehensive than that. It contains
and you spend a lot of time trying to go
through more detail, and as I've been trying to do.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time going into the report, Andy. I know the last time we touched base, you'd gone through at least half of the report. You're trying to get to the end of it. So far, have you been able to find a smoking gun anywhere?
There's lots of little niggly things that do require further investigation. I mean, what struck me really is the conduct of the bid teams. Everyone appears to have been at it. Everyone appears to have been greasing palms, pretty much, apart from the ones that were obviously cleared. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked about football development funds. I mean, you can see how the whole system was sort of set up to facilitate corruption in a way, because if somebody says to you, "Well, I'll provide $2.5 million, say, for the construction of a new headquarters in your home country, if you vote for me," that's obviously a big incentive to.
All right, no, Andy, we've just lost Andy there. That line is gone. It was Skype and not landline that was speaking to Andy there. We're going to carry on with Elasto just to finish off this little chat. Elasto, the one thing that I think a lot of people will be looking forward to is to get to a point where maybe CAF is as fortunate, if I were to say, as UEFA is. Do you see that happening with the new regime that Jan Infantino facilitated to happen?
Yeah, look, it's a new executive as well at CAF level. Ahmad, coming from the Southern Africa. Good for us. We are so much excited and happy that finally there seems to be some parity in terms of the leadership of CAF. But yeah, it has also had its own shares of problems. CAF, under Issa Hayatou. If you look at CAF, the way it is, it's always a place where when it's voting time, people tend to come to Africa to solicitate those votes. So we hope that CAF as well will be transparent and do things properly for the best interest of the continent. But so far, it looks like Ahmad Hamad definitely wants to change football in Africa for good.
All right, now we'll see what happens with that. Last, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time as well, sharing, going through with us on this journey when we're trying to connect with people from Europe via Skype. It's dropping us, but also giving us your very valuable insights and thoughts on the matter.
Thank you.
There you have it, Elasto Capoeira, football analyst, chatting to us in studio while we had guests on Skype talking to us about the Garcia report. We'll take a short break. When we come back, you'll still be watching Newsroom.
Today on Rights and Recourse, we will unpack the new traditional court model.
The idea of the bill is not to overregulate, to basically set the principles.
The most important aspect of this bill is that it understands that customary law, by its nature, is consensual. That I have a right to affiliate, I have a right, therefore, to opt in, and I have a right to opt out.
The opt-out provision is basically one that you've got to respect the court in the sense of if you've been summoned, you've got to tell the clerk of the court at least that you're not willing to attend.
The challenge that I would like to throw to the Department of Justice, it has to come up with mechanisms of ensuring that people who exercise their right to opt out or to opt in are not in any way victimized.
#Rights with Dumila Matez on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
Welcome back. South African sprint sensations are hoisting the country's flag sky high in the Diamond League. Wait for Nikar keeps on breaking records, and Akani Simbine is also holding his own against the best in the world. Van Niekerk set a meeting record of 43.62 seconds in Lausanne, Switzerland, featuring Michael Johnson once again, whose record had held since 1996, some 21 years ago.
There is Wade van Niekerk, the Olympic champion and world record holder, the reigning world champion as well.
It seems like he is out to rewrite the history books. Since breaking Johnson's 400 meters record in Rio last year, Van Niekerk has never looked back. His star is shining the brightest. A lot was expected from him at the Diamond League's 400 meters race in Switzerland, and he didn't disappoint, breaking Johnson's meeting record, posting a world lead of 43.62 seconds. Just a month away from the IAAF World Championships in London, Van Niekerk is enjoying the world lead in both the 200 and the 400 meters events.
Van Niekerk there takes it, 43.63. It is indeed a meeting record by just 3/100ths of a record. He wipes away the 21-year-old meeting record of Michael Johnson. And a very, very solid opener indeed from Wade van Niekerk.
But what about Akani Simbine? Meanwhile, another sprinting sensation, Akani Simbine, is showing good form in the build-up to next month's World Champs. Simbine was up against American Justin Gatlin, who pipped him on the line by just 0.01 second in their previous 100 meters encounter on Tuesday. This time, the South African finished third in a time of 9.99 seconds.
Coming through as well. It's going to be very tight on the line. It might just be Gatlin gets it.
And his compatriot and training partner, Henrico Branches, finished in 6th place.
Mighty, under 10 seconds, 9.98. Simbine, under 10 seconds, 9.99.
Ndlovu, SABC News.
I really cannot wait for those London World Championships to see whether Akani Simbine will really do it, because he's been threatening to do it to beat Justin Gatlin and Isaiah Young and anybody else willing to come. We know Wade van Niekerk is going to be breaking that record. Now, rugby clubs in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro believe that the Southern Kings have already been excluded from their 2018 edition of Super Rugby. The official announcement is being made by SARU today. Clubs say this will have a negative effect on rugby development as well as transformation. It's believed that the Southern Kings plan to be included in the European Pro 12 this summer with their opening match against Irish side Munster in September.
Try-scoring machine Makazole Mapimpi and Andy Sanzila are the two players of colour who have done well this season in the Super Rugby competition. But next year, they will be lost to Super Rugby unless they are absorbed by another franchise. It's unclear whether the pool of these players will stay and sign new contracts to compete in the Pro 12. Eastern Province Rugby Union say they will not take the decision lying down. EP Kings has already been excluded from the Currie Cup Premier Division.
They still have to ensure confidentiality in the process and credibility. So we're unable to get exactly what is happening, but we're waiting tomorrow, which is 7th July, will be the D-Day. As this new executive, I want to tell you the team we put together is the best ever assembled rugby administration team in this country. We want to promise the public of the Eastern Cape and EP Rugby in particular that will bring dignity back, sanity will prevail, no more ever again will be given hospital passes.
Super Rugby is everything to South Africans, whether you're black, white, yellow or green. Super League Rugby is like Currie Cup Rugby in the old days. Everybody wanted to play in the Currie Cup. We want to play in the Super League, and we deserve to be in the Super League.
The decision to remove the Southern Kings from Super Rugby will make it difficult to nurture young talent.
Finishing is an understatement at the moment, because the Southern Kings were a fertile platform for young ones to aspire to play there on that platform. For the local team, get local recognition, become role models locally. But that has been taken away to London. It's a massive blow to up-and-coming youngsters.
Clubs will suffer tremendously with the decision taken by the South African Rugby Union. And therefore, I am appealing to Mark Alexander, who is the president of South African Rugby Union. I'm appealing to my good friend Francois Davids Kabali to please let natural justice prevail and let us retain the Kings for future development.
The Southern Kings have won 5 matches in the Super Rugby competition so far and will be looking to add to that tally when they take on the Bulls in Pretoria this weekend. SARU is expected to provide full details of the European Pro 12 competition in Cape Town tomorrow. Zolani Moya, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
And just to let you know exactly where it stands, both Cheetahs and Kings are negotiating to participate in alternate rugby competitions next season. That formal announcement for their axing from Super Rugby was made this morning following a special general meeting of South African Rugby in Cape Town. More about all of that a little later. We're going to take a short break. Top of the hour is what we're coming to with next. Elvis will be joining us. Make sure you stay close. You have been watching Newsroom.
Africa is getting more and more digitized, and people have to navigate through an increasingly connected world.
I did call my bay over here.
At school, I use my Wi-Fi. On Network, we tell you about Africa's technology and social media landscape.
Politicians already do use Twitter a lot.
It's both Android and iOS compatible.
A solar-charged box that includes everything, the computer, the projector.
That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 9 p.m.
Water-wise. Water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Many saying that the former minister is now endorsing Ramaphosa as the next president. Campaign time, Prof?
Yeah.
So early.
Let's at least accept that people have a right to expressing themselves in terms of who they support.
But what is lacking very seriously is that there is no that leadership role that is played by the leadership to say, we haven't opened succession and let us deal with those that are campaigning openly, because we haven't opened it as the leadership of the ANC.
What we need in this country is that we need a ruling party or a leading party to be able to engage with issues that affect the people.
Our people campaign openly. It weakens the organization. In fact, it makes the policies of the ANC even more popular.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor and catch on analysts unpacking top stories every Sunday from 9 a.m.
Yes, the 7th of the 7th, 2017, right here on the Newsroom. This is the final hour, Jumbo Africa.
Yeah, Jumbo Africa. One.
I'm Elvis Presslin.
I'm Kendall Makamat.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock, this final hour. And today we focus on prisoners at the Kosi Mampuru prison who rioted and attacked warders after inmates demanded parole for eligible lifers, as well as better treatment they asked for, Kendall.
Well, it actually brings us directly to our very question for this particular thing. We want to find out from you, what are your thoughts on this? Do prisoners have too many rights in South Africa?
Well, this is what you are telling us. Mystic Man says strip show, entrance free, KFC, gym, water, electricity, internet and education all free, plus accommodation and doctors. What more can you ask for?
Clubby So says they have many rights. Looks like they're enjoying life more inside than outside. Hashtag prison strippers, hashtag prison strike.
Well, you heard it earlier from Miles Budu. He doesn't agree with all our viewers. He says it's tough out there. He was a prisoner himself, and he says it's a tough environment.
Well,
but we're also conducting a poll on the DA that have called on the British public relations firm B-Pottinger to disclose all their dealings with the Guptas after the firm admitted to fomenting racial divisions and promoting the term white monopoly capital. And that term is now colorless, Kendall.
It's now colorless after the pronouncement was made on Friday at the NPC. And our poll for you, with 328 votes, is about whether B-Pottinger should be forced to disclose all dealings with the Guptas in South Africa. Do you agree with that or not?
Well, 91% are saying yes, B-Pottinger must be forced to disclose all those dealings with the Guptas. Only 9%, and I suspect that number is actually shrinking from 10% earlier.
Elvis, isn't it a bit of a concern that it's so easy to sow racial discord in South Africa?
Exactly, with a public relations firm coming into the country and sowing divisions, and this is what we've seen. But
let's find out from our friends. Artin Mbena says our country is not a spaza shop. They must be forced to disclose everything involving that monopoly family.
They become monopoly family now. Mystic Man continues. He says, I now propose this Gupta thing to be included in our national anthem. Because Sikalela e Africa.
Gupta live.
Gupta live.
Hey, Batu. Yeah, there's no chill in Twitter in South Africa. Absolutely no chill whatsoever.
So keep them coming. We'll read your comments as we continue today. But there's also the sporting question, Kendall. The Kings might become the Queens after today.
Whoa, I wouldn't have put it that way. But yes, there you have it. Elvis is asking really in code speak, do the Kings deserve to be dropped from Super Rugby? And your thoughts on this matter are being sought and looked for. What are you saying on this sporting question for today?
Let's take a look. This one from Zalton says, no way, Jose. EP Kings is the best performing side in South African rugby. Give the guys a break and stop killing rugby in the Eastern Cape. I believe that sentiment is a true reflection because they've been doing very well.
They have been doing extremely well. They had a poor start to the season, but have finished off with a flourish, and they can walk our heads held high. No, Kings should not be dropped, and that's from Lechasa Batlamul.
Well, keep them coming, guys. We'll read them as we continue. But let's get down to work right now and take a look at all your headlines. "76 police officers have been injured in clashes with protesters in Germany's city of Hamburg ahead of the beginning of the G20 summit. President Jacob Zuma says that South Africa will use its participation in the G20 summit to lure investors and seek ways to create jobs. And the High Court here in Johannesburg will today rule on the South African National Editors Forum's application for an interdict against Black First, Land First for intimidating journalists. Those are your headlines. Before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. I'm looking forward to the cricket, though, Kendall.
I think we all are, and looking forward to see. I think they should be walking out onto the field right now, see how it goes, see if South Africa is able to pull something back on day 2. But it remains to be seen. Good morning to you. This is what we've got about yesterday's news with regards to the Proteas before they start today.
That's the end of proceedings on day 1. And what a satisfying day it is for England's captain.
The Proteas bowling attack flounders after a blistering start, giving England the advantage after day 1 of the test at Lords.
Van Niekerk goes in lane 5. A lot of eyes on the South African.
Wade van Niekerk is looking in ominous form for the World Championships as he blasts another long-standing Michael Johnson milestone, the 400-metre meeting record in Lausanne.
Van Niekerk now begins to stride away and eats up the ground and eases away from Matwala, whose stride is shortening. Great running in 3 from Sebe. Van Niekerk there takes it. 43.63. It is indeed a meeting record.
Game, 7 match,
Novak Djokovic breezes through to the 3rd round of Wimbledon with a straightforward victory over Adam Parase.
6-2, 6-2, 6-1, and he got better and better.
Now, all this and more we've got for you in the Sports Bulletin. Be sure to stick around for it at about 11:35. And now it's back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. 76 police officers have been injured in clashes with protesters in the German city of Hamburg, where the G20 summit will start shortly. Police confirmed that 3 officers were taken to hospital and scores of protesters were injured. The clashes began when police charged at masked protesters at the Welcome to Hell march attended by 12,000 people. World leaders, including the U.S. President Donald Trump, will discuss climate change, trade and other major issues. Police fired water cannons and pepper spray at masked protesters who hurled bottles, stones and flares at them. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma says that South Africa will use its participation in the G20 summit to woo investors and seek ways to create jobs. Now, he was speaking to the SABC ahead of the 2-day meeting.
We certainly highlight the issues from the continent. We have always done so. In the last G20, Africa was discussed very positively by the G20. We'll expect that to continue because we believe the problems of the continent and challenges are well known. And we believe that our being here, in a sense, although we are not members because we represent Africa, but in another sense we do because we are the African country understanding the challenges of the continent. So we are happy that on the agenda there is a session that will deal with the matters of Africa.
Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is visiting the Amatolo and the OR Tambo districts in the Eastern Cape province to participate in the 20th anniversary celebrations of the Eastern Cape House of Traditional Leaders in Bisho. The region is known for the number of deaths among the inmates, and the focus will also be on the winter circumcision season already underway. SABC's Busisiwe Jamsana talked to the Deputy President on the purpose of his visit.
We are here to celebrate, really, to celebrate the whole traditional leadership of this province. It's been 20 years since the structure of traditional leadership was fully recognized and its dignity fully restored and upheld by the ANC-led government. And this day we are really celebrating the restoration and reconfirmation of the role and the dignity of our traditional leaders. And we are going to have in the function the kings of our people in this area, and I would even count up to 5 kings, who are really the repository of the traditions and the values of our people. And all of us gathered this morning will be paying due respect to the organic and traditional leadership of our people and celebrating, as well as remembering the past role of those who preceded us in the gallant manner in which they fought against colonialism, they fought against oppression, and leading up to today, we fondly remember that role, and we are confirming that we are a people who have always had an organic leadership. And for us in the ANC, it means even a lot more, because the ANC was formed by an agglomeration of traditional leaders from all over South Africa who felt that the country needed to have an organization such as the ANC, and together with religious leaders, they formed this glorious organization. So today we celebrate, we remember the good role that was played by our traditional leaders. Well, the deaths of young men in initiation is a matter of great concern, not only to the government, but also to our traditional leaders. And this is a matter that we are all dealing with. And the good thing about it is that there's a good cooperation between our traditional leaders and government, and the traditional leaders. We're all involved in a process which is going to ensure that moving forward, we minimize the deaths, we put in place a number of controls and systems and measures, and everybody's consciousness has been raised to that level. And I'm sure going forward we are going to have less deaths, because we are working hand in hand with our traditional leaders. So the matter is being addressed, and it will be addressed to great results going forward.
Criminal Court has given South Africa 5 days to appeal its ruling that Pretoria was in breach of an obligation to arrest the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. The South African government was taken to task by the court for failing to execute an arrest warrant against al-Bashir while he attended an African Union summit back in 2015 here in Johannesburg, Sandton.
In addition to its finding of non-compliance with South Africa's obligations under the Rome Statute, the court also decided not to impose further punitive measures against Pretoria, which allowed for 2 courses of action. One, to refer South Africa to the Security Council, because it was the Council itself that referred the situation in Sudan's Darfur region to the court in the first place. Or 2, to refer South Africa to the Assembly of States Parties of the Rome Statute for possible censure, the court finding that neither of these actions was warranted.
In these circumstances, a referral of South Africa's non-compliance with the court's request for arrest and surrender of Omar al-Bashir would be of no consequence as a mechanism for the court to obtain cooperation.
South Africa had argued 2 distinct legal bases for not arresting Sudan's president. First, that customary international law prevented it from arresting a sitting head of state, and secondly, the host agreement it entered into with the African Union. But the Chamber was not persuaded.
The Chamber is not persuaded by South Africa's latter argument and considers that Article 7.1 of the host agreement on its terms does not apply to Omar al-Bashir and thus could not have conferred upon him any immunity.
The Chamber also found that it was unable to identify a rule in customary international law that would exclude immunity for a head of state when their arrest is sought for international crimes by another state, even when the arrest is sought on behalf of an international court, in this instance, the ICC.
No immunity needs to be waived, and state parties can execute the court's request for arrest and surrender of Omar al-Bashir without violating Sudan's rights under international law. Accordingly, South Africa was under the duty to arrest Omar al-Bashir and surrender him to the court while he was on South African territory in June 2015.
Even if the justices had referred South Africa to the Security Council, it's unclear what action, if any, might have been taken given the composition of this council. China, Russia and the United States, all permanent members, are themselves not party to the Rome Statute, and because of these powerful countries that do not recognize the ICC's jurisdiction, South Africa was likely to escape censure anyway. What seems more likely now is further action against the government in South African domestic courts. Sherman Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
And we're staying with the story now. The International Criminal Court has rejected South Africa's arguments that the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir enjoyed immunity while in the country as a visiting head of state, and has given South Africa 5 days to appeal its ruling that Pretoria was in breach of an obligation to arrest al-Bashir. Now, earlier, I spoke to Professor Mia Swart, a professor in international law at the University of Johannesburg, on the implications of the ruling on South Africa.
It doesn't have, very substantial implications. In a sense, this reflects badly on us. But in terms of follow-up, in terms of implementation, in terms of, a sanction, not much will happen. In my view, it's a rap on the knuckles more than anything else. Yeah.
Now, South Africa has 5 days to appeal this particular judgment. If we don't, what then? What happens after that?
If we don't appeal, it simply means, of course, that the decision stands and that we are held in non-cooperation. As I just said, not much flows from that. And that is part of my own skepticism of this kind of decision, that it's highly symbolic. It means that in the eyes of the international community, we might lose some face. But I certainly don't think government is too concerned about that.
Some are saying that, as you indicated, it's a slap on the wrist, perhaps, and of course the matter was not referred to the Security Council. Does this mean that this is a get-out-of-jail card for South Africa?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, but we're not in jail, of course. We're not entirely in jail because other African states, have taken the same position. So they might be in jail with us, but this is not a major concern. We know that there's been 13 non-cooperation decisions, including, for states such as Malawi, Kenya, the DRC. So I think that, the more countries there are that decide not to cooperate, in a sense, it sort of destigmatizes non-cooperation, or it even, can reflect positively on a state in the eyes of certain leaders. And this is part of the problem.
Now, if a damaging measure will not be imposed on the country for our transgressions, why would the ICC then pursue this particular matter in any case?
Well, it's not unusual for a case or for a court, an international court, to have some sort of follow-up procedure. The European Court of Human Rights, for example, has a very formal implementation procedure that actually works. The problem with the ICC is that their implementation procedure, their follow-up procedure, doesn't actually work. You might know that they have the option of referring the case to the Security Council or the ASP, which has happened in every other non-cooperation decision, except for in this case, which in my view was the wrong decision. If I may elaborate on that.
Yes, please.
The court basically said that, there would be no point in referring us to the ASP, which is the Assembly of State Parties of the ICC, or the Security Council, which is possible because it's the Security Council that referred the situation in Sudan to the ICC. So because this referral is not going to be made to the ASP or we're not going to be reported to the ASP or the ICC, or the Security Council,
yes.
Those bodies will also not, see themselves as being responsible to enforce implementation in some way, to provide, basically put pressure on the South African government. Whereas in all other cases, they have been tasked with some role. They just didn't live up to that role. But in my view, it's not up to the court to say, oh, we will not refer it to those bodies because, there has been no follow-up in the past, or there is no point.
We also know that South Africa has been advocating to occupy the one revolving permanent seat on the Security Council. This particular ruling by the ICC, will that harm our efforts, perhaps?
I suspect so, and I think this is where the sanction, in a sense, come in, and the real consequences is in terms of our standing in the international community, which has already taken a beating in terms of our performance on human rights, etc. And I think that we shouldn't be too arrogant about this and think that we will be the African state that will necessarily occupy that seat. We know that the Security Council reform is very slow. It's not even, really a priority. So I would say that, in terms of our chances in the first place, which are not that high, this certainly affects our chances, yes.
Now, we also know that we want to pull out of the ICC. Will this strengthen the case for South Africa and other African states to pull out of the ICC because the ICC has been seen as biased towards African countries?
Right. So I've heard that government is quite, now sort of fortified in its initial attempts and thinking around withdrawal, and that it's reviving the threat to withdraw. In my view, this is petulant and even childish, right? To say, okay, we've lost, now we will not play anymore, right? Because their chances of winning were so low in the first place. So it was pretty predictable that the ICC was going to support its previous decision, was going to stand on its principles, and that it wasn't going to, decide against, in favor of the state. So I think this is reviving the withdrawal rhetoric. Whether it will actually happen is another question, but I think it is damaging to keep threatening with withdrawal. And my sense is that this time round there is a higher possibility that we might actually withdraw.
In closing, what lessons do you think, Professor, could South Africa learn from this whole episode, especially with the Omar al-Bashir case where he was not arrested here in South Africa?
Right. I think to learn a lesson, you must be willing to learn a lesson, and you must be willing to see that you've made mistakes. I don't think the state is there. I think that the state is acting in an arrogant way, and you have to live up to your international obligations, your treaty obligations. So if you sign a statute, then you must make sure that your behavior will be, according to the obligations under that statute.
Former Free State Agriculture MEC Mosebenzi Zwane says he will happily defend himself in court. This after the EFF in the province laid criminal charges against him and the Premier Ace Magashule. It relates to their involvement in the alleged laundering of millions of rands earmarked for the multi-million rand dairy project in the Vrede area.
The EFF on the warpath. Party members laid charges at the Park Road police station in Bloemfontein. They want the police to investigate allegations of government wasteful spending regarding the controversial dairy project. The money was allegedly used to fund the lavish Gupta wedding at Sun City in 2013.
30 million, it has went to the private family to pay for a lousy wedding. Where's the foreigners for that particular matter? Our land it has been taken there in Vrede by the very same foreigners. They're not paying anything. They've got 99 years lease for free. It's sheer corruption which has been committed by Ace Magashule and Mosebenzi Zwane. That is why we're here as the EFF, because our task is to expose corruption at all material times.
Meanwhile, the DA is still awaiting the Public Protector's report on the dairy farm report.
We were supposed to have been out by the end of June, and unfortunately we are also informed again that the report it won't be ready by the 30th of June, but possibly by the 14th of July.
Zwane, now Minister of Mineral Resources, says he's prepared to challenge the accusations in court.
Finally, people of South Africa are respecting the law. They are not just vilifying me, they are acting. Let's see what the court says, because they'll have to put facts on the table, and I'll be happy to be called an answer.
The provincial government says it will study the charges and will respond at an appropriate time.
The High Court in Johannesburg will today rule on the South African National Editors Forum's application for an interdict against Black First, Land First. SANEF wants the court to order the BLF to stop intimidating 11 journalists. The BLF has threatened to continue its protest against these journalists whom it accuses of racism.
SANEF and 11 journalists and editors urge the court to uphold media freedom. They seek an interdict against BLF from harassing, intimidating, assaulting and threatening journalists. Last week, the movement demonstrated outside editor Peter Brewster's home, vandalizing property and assaulting 2 members of the media.
Attorneys were also able to demonstrate that, there has been an orchestrated campaign to threaten our journalists. It has been harassment.
List of names of 8 white and 3 black journalists, accusing them of being biased and racist. It posted threatening social media messages against them.
The South African National Editors Forum approached the court to get an interdict against the Black Land First movement, not about their right to protest, but only about the threatening tone of some of their tweets and also the actions against 3 editors.
The BLF asked the court to scrap the case, saying it was not urgent. However, the court ruled in SANEF's favor.
We are going to continue to protest against any racist journalist. We are not going to stop.
The in the Western Cape says those involved in harassment of journalists should be arrested and prosecuted.
Journalists, irrespective of the perspective which they have, they must be respected. Their rights as journalists must be protected. And what has happened needs to be condemned with the strongest terms possible.
Judgment is expected to be handed down at midday. Hasina Gori, SABC News.
Meanwhile, Save South Africa and the DA have called on the British public relations firm B-Pottinger to disclose all dealings with the Guptas and President Jacob Zuma. The British company yesterday apologized unreservedly to anyone impacted by the work it did for the Gupta family and its Oak Bay company. The firm stopped working for the Guptas 3 months ago as pressure mounted over allegations of state capture. B-Pottinger had been accused of helping to orchestrate social media attacks on journalists who did exposés on the Guptas. The firm was also accused of fomenting racial divisions by promoting the term white monopoly capital in attempts to divert the attention away from the Gupta family. B-Pottinger says it has dismissed the official who was in charge of the Gupta account and suspended 2 other employees. And that, of course, why we are asking you this question on our poll today, and we want to maybe check with you. What do you make of all of this, whether or not B-Pottinger should be forced to release and disclose all the dealings with the Guptas in South Africa? There are 335 votes in. You have 20 hours left to vote. 90% of you are saying yes. There's one more member of a certain faction that came on board and says no, they should not disclose. Well, I'll read some of your comments coming through on the matter a little bit later. But right now, we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back after that.
So from Port Elizabeth, I eventually left there, joined the circus, as you know, and travelled. I was a singer, I was a race car driver, and I wanted to see what my chances were in America. So I started off with MTV, and I started producing music, because I was in the music business, you know. So I started producing musical acts with Black Sabbath, Guns N' Roses, Motorhead, and I became Wine, Women and Song. That was my life in Hollywood.
A pioneer, a Crystal Award recipient, Basil Gold is a force to be reckoned with. For more inspiring stories, stay tuned to Bupilong every Friday.
Phones, cloud systems and robots have taken over a lot of participants and medals.
Our accounting system is actually based on the cloud.
Google nowadays can tell you where you parked your car.
And Africa's entrepreneurs are using technology to create.
With Pocket Masipala, you can basically do all the services that you would do at the municipality physically by going there, but you can now do them on a mobile app.
Join me, Spumelele Zondi, on Sundays at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. Human Rights Watch has released a report documenting brazen war crimes committed by Seleka and anti-Balaka fighters across the center and eastern parts of the war-torn Central African Republic. At least 566 civilians have been killed in war crimes committed by armed groups since 2014 in the violence-ridden Central African Republic. Now, for more on this report, we are joined via Skype by Lewis Mudge. He's the author of the report and a researcher with the Africa Division at Human Rights Watch. Lewis, very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Before we get into the report, Lewis, I just want you to give us a sort of overview about the humanitarian situation in the country, in the CAR.
Has experienced 4 years of protracted conflict. Sorry, there's here. Sorry, I fixed that. And it's before the crisis, this was one of the poorest countries in the world. This was a country that was always ranking at the bottom of the UN's index lists on places to live. So when the Seleka overthrew the Bozize government, they basically turned an already poor country completely upside down. What that meant was that people who are already struggling, who are already desperate to get by, have now been thrown into this 4-year conflict. Aid agencies and humanitarians and UN agencies are providing a lifeline to the majority of the country. That is in the center and east and some pockets in the northwest. And these agencies are having an incredibly difficult time accessing these regions where they can deliver this assistance because of armed group activity. Now, on top of that, we're talking about a country of 4.6 million people. Of those 4.6, well over 1 million are displaced. So that's over 500,000 internally displaced and approximately 800,000 refugees outside the country. So we're talking about a significant proportion of the population that's also displaced, which in of itself, displacement camps, refugee camps, brings an entirely different humanitarian context in. You've got issues of cholera in some of the camps in the center and east of the country. You've got issues of sanitation. You've got issues of housing and issues of food. So in terms of the humanitarian situation, to get back to your original question, it's an incredibly difficult one, and it's seriously underfunded. It's only about 30% funded as to where it needs to be.
Now, let's go back to the report, the 92-page report in which you documented the war crimes in Central African Republic. Take us through that.
So what we did with this report was we wanted to document crimes from 2014 to 2017, to April of this year. And we did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is a report that goes deep on research, goes deep on naming perpetrators, on naming the heads of armed groups, and actually identifying these individuals. And these individuals are well known. People know where they are in the Central African Republic, and they can be found. Number two, we wanted to use this over an extended timeline to show just how widespread these abuses are. You can't just say that someone's committing war crimes. You have to actually demonstrate it. You have to show years, months or years of demonstrating either war crimes or crimes against humanity are being committed. You have to establish a structure within these armed groups. The third reason we decided to release this report now is because it's on the heels of a very expansive and extensive UN report that came out in the end of May called the Mapping Report. This is over 600 pages of abuses since 2003. But those abuses pretty much tail off in their reporting in 2014, 2015. So we felt it was good to put our report on the heels of that report. And finally, and most importantly, this report is being launched when there's a new hybrid national special criminal court in the country. This court, made up of international and national prosecutors and judges, we think is the best chance of ending the cycles of impunity in the Central African Republic that drive this violence. The International Criminal Court, which I know is a hot topic right now in South Africa, they opened their investigations in September 2014. But as we all know, the International Criminal Court is very limited in its ability to go after more than just a couple individuals, and this takes a very, very long time. And the justice is rendered in Europe, in a European capital, very, very far away from Bangui, where that justice is much more relevant. This new special criminal court will be based in Bangui. We'll have this international component. We'll have international funding. We'll have international investigators alongside with these national teams. And we think that this court can get up and running much more quickly and can render justice much more closer to home and serve as a real warning to these warlords and these leaders of these armed groups that are continuing to commit war crimes.
Now, you are suggesting that the report have the names of all the armed group commanders that's supposed to be held accountable for these war crimes, but nothing is being done. So why has no one been arrested as yet?
Well, just to correct you on one aspect, we're only talking about 3 or 4 provinces in the Central African Republic in this particular report. 2/3 of the entire country are either occupied or have the presence of armed groups, and that's just to demonstrate how big this problem is in the CAR. Our group really only focuses on 3 provinces with a little bit on another province. So we're talking about a very specific geographical location with some very specific armed group actors. To get to your point as to why are they so difficult to get, some of them have been arrested. The UN peacekeeping mission, MINUSCA, has something called urgent temporary measures that they're operating under. These are called UTMs. And under those UTMs, they've already arrested over a dozen high-profile leaders of either Seleka or Anti-Balaka, the 2 most relevant armed groups that we're talking about. So some of them have been arrested. This is something that's very much underreported, in my opinion, because it does demonstrate, in my opinion, a real win for the UN working with the national government in getting some of these bad guys behind bars. So when this special criminal court does get up and running, there are already people in jail who very probably will be investigated by this court. So that's I think, very interesting to point out that this court is not theoretical and hypothetical. They can actually start work right away. Number 2, some of these other armed group actors, they will be difficult to arrest. They have a lot of men around them. They're heavily armed. We're talking about the Central African Republic. We've got Congo to the south, Chad to the north, South Sudan, and Sudan to the east. It's very easy to get heavy machine guns and rockets in this region, and they are quite well armed. However, the UN peacekeeping mission since this year has been much more robust in enforcing its mandate. They've been much more proactive in protecting civilians, which is a key aspect of its mandate. And some of that does include engaging with these armed groups. And what we've seen is that when the UN does engage, especially with attack helicopter gunships, the armed groups are very, very reluctant to fight. They pull back, and it's in this context where they can actually arrest some of these members. So, Human Rights Watch is an organization that obviously strives for peace, but we're talking about individuals who now for 4 years have shown no remorse in killing civilians, including women and children, and burning villages, and in using rape as a weapon of war. And at a certain moment, the UN is going to have to be as proactive as it's been, if not more, in asserting protection of civilians as its core aspect of its mandate, and in perhaps arresting some of these individuals.
And just finally, Lewis, just briefly, what are some of the major recommendations coming out of the report?
So we have a few recommendations. Number 1 is for the UN, as I just said, to robustly interpret its mandate and to engage some of these groups when protection of civilians is on the line. Number 2, with regards to the special criminal court that I was just talking about, this is justice on the cheap. This is a shoestring budget when you compare it to the International Criminal Court. It has approximately $5 to $7 million a year budget. And right now, it only has a budget for 14 months. So we're urging international partners of the Central African Republic to recognize that impunity is tied to violence, and violence is obviously tied to development and in making Central African Republic once more a viable state. So we think this court needs to be funded in the long term. And finally, the reason why we're publishing photos and names of these armed groups commanders is because they're on WhatsApp, these guys are on Twitter, they see social media. We're trying to let them know that they need to rein in their fighters now. They need to stop these killings because they are ongoing. They need to recognize that the world is watching and that they are going to be held accountable for their actions.
Lewis Mudge, I thank you so much for your time and giving us your perspective there in relation to that report. That was Lewis Mudge. He's the author of a report and a researcher with the Africa Division at Human Rights Watch, giving us his thoughts on what is currently happening in the CAR. Absolutely devastating. Well, we'll be taking a break and we'll be right back after that with your sports news.
The Pan-African Parliament, as a legislative body, could go a long way in continuing to promote women's rights in all African member states.
Moon will be elected president. A decisive win by him will provide much-needed stability in South Korea.
The Deputy President and the SADC Oversight Committee have been mandated to convene a multi-stakeholder national dialogue before elections.
5 teams are trapped in the relegation mud. These include Bloemfontein Celtic, 12th on the log, followed by Chipa United, Free State Stars and Baroka, who are second from the bottom, as well as Highlands Park, who have won only 4 matches.
We're on point with breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Now the G20 summit is underway in Hamburg in Germany. Let's go to our SABC reporters, Wandile Mbeje, who is there. Very good morning to you, Mzwai.
Beautiful Iris, most young minister.
Mzwai, can you hear me?
Welcome to Hamburg, Germany, where the G20 summit is taking place. You know, the SABC has been giving you live coverage where possible to give you the first-hand information of what is happening here at the G20. You know, South Africa is one of the only member from the African continent which is the member of the G20. But without wasting much time, I'm joined by our Minister of Finance, Minister Malusi Kigaba, who will give us an update of what is happening, why they are here and what they are hoping to achieve. Thank you very much, Minister. Here you are. What is South Africa doing here? We know that you're the only member, but what is it that you are pushing and hoping to achieve?
The G20 is an important player in the international economy. It has played a very critical role in coordinating efforts to drive recovery from the 2008 financial crisis and to ensure that there is inclusive growth. During these discussions over the next 2 days, we're going to be focusing on the global economic recovery all over the world. The G20 constitutes about 85% of the countries that make up the IMF. And so we have an important role to play in coordinating our economic recovery efforts and focusing on various other aspects. There are positive signs in the global economy. We are going to focus on those issues. There's going to be a discussion later after the retreat by heads of state, where we will talk about the global economic recovery, focusing on the opportunities and risks. There are positive signs. The whole world is going to register positive growth, but there are also risks in the global economy. International terrorism, anti-globalization, especially among developed countries, the tendency towards protectionism also among developed countries. There will also be specific focus areas such as migration, climate change, and other aspects that all of us in the world need to focus on. South Africa's particular interests are to advance our national interest in relation to all of those discussions, but to also advance Africa's interests as the only African country in the G20. We have to ensure that Africa's voice is heard. There's a number of initiatives by the Germany presidency of the G20, including the partnership with Africa as well as the compact with Africa. We need to engage with those issues so that Africa's voice and Africa's stamp is put firmly on those programs. Those programs need to be consultative. They need to be aligned with the AU's Agenda 2063 as well as the infrastructure program and industrialization programs of the AU. And we therefore need to ensure that the issues that are being raised there have a positive impact. And Compact with Africa and the Partnership with Africa programs must not be used as a counterbalance in order to discourage the migration of Africans to Europe, but they need to be put up in order to complement the efforts by the African continent to develop the continent and ensure that there is faster, sustainable, big and inclusive growth on the African continent.
Having said all of that, Minister, are there people which are very influential here you are likely to meet?
We have met earlier this morning. The BRICS heads of state had a meeting where they all affirmed their commitment to BRICS coordinative efforts, as well as to driving inclusive growth. They all affirmed their commitment to international trade, multilateralism, to cooperation, and ensuring that they work together to combat the risks to the global economy. And we are working very closely together towards the China BRICS summit. And from there is a retreat by African heads of state. There are bilateral meetings that the President, the Minister of International Relations and myself are going to have, where we are trying to coordinate our efforts with other countries towards a common objective. Later tonight, I will be meeting with various other finance ministers where we will talk about the compact with Africa as well as global economic recovery from the point of view of the finance ministers. At that meeting, South Africa will be making a leading input so that we can be heard articulating our perspective with regard to the compact with Africa. So there's a number of activities that are taking place on the sides of the main summit and the different working sessions that are going to take place.
Do you have perhaps as part of your delegation people from business or those private companies that are very key in the recovery of our economy?
The G20 summit is a summit of the heads of state. They are accompanied by their finance and international relations ministers. And so anybody else who is neither of the three mentioned is therefore not here. It's not only in relation to South Africa, it's in relation to all the other 20 countries that are attending the G20 summit.
Soon after the ANC policy conference, coming to a forum like this, what lesson as Treasury did you get from that ANC policy conference, and then looking at what is happening here at the G20? So anything that we can learn from both events?
We are quite mindful of the policy debates that have taken place at the ANC National Policy Conference and the resolutions adopted by the conference, which are going to be presented to the National Conference in December. So we have listened carefully to the issues that were raised there. Some of those issues are part of the issues that we are going to be raising in the various discussions that will be taking place at this summit here in Hamburg. The most crucial thing is driving inclusive growth, ensuring that there is recovery. For us on the African continent, the issues of that aggressive growth story are quite critical. It is important for us that as Africa, we raise our voice on the issues of globalization and terrorism as well as protectionism, because Africa depends on international trade for us to be able to grow at this particular moment.
A very quick one, Minister, particularly on the reserve about the possible litigation that is coming from what has been happening at the policy conference. And another question added to that, are you likely to meet, let's say, for example, the ECB? And what is your attitude to what F have said about South Africa's story?
As I've issued a statement, an extensive statement on the steps that I'm going to take to ensure that the Public Protector's report is reviewed. I have met with the Public Protector, and I will continue engaging with the Public Protector in order to seek an amicable solution. So insofar as the issues that the Public Protector has raised, we need to separate the policy process which arose from the ANC National Policy Conference from the legal processes which have resulted in me taking the decision that I'm going to seek review of the Public Protector's report. In so doing, a next stance towards the Public Protector, but there are issues that legally need so that there is clarity. I have indicated that we respect the Public Protector, the independence of the Public Protector, but I also wish to affirm the independence of the Central Bank of South African Reserve Bank in relation to setting monetary policy in partnership or after consultation with the South African government. I believe that the issues that have regard to the role of the South African Reserve Bank are properly constitution as well as the powers that I have as Minister. And the IMF has raised a report based on our engagements with them. We note the report. We note that critical in what the IMF is raising is that South Africa needs to step up its efforts to drive growth and recovery in its economy. Those are steps towards. I have indicated that perhaps next week I will be releasing a 30 to enhance growth and recovery in our economy. And so there are steps that we are taking. We believe that the South African economy is going to grow positively this year than we did in the previous year.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm sure we're still going to have time to speak about a number of issues because we still have at least two more days.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was Minister of Finance, Minister Malusi Kaba, who just gave us an update as the first day of the G20 gets underway here in Hamburg. Back to the studio.
Thank you very much, Mzwandile Mbeja. Coming to us live from Hamburg in Germany, where the G20 is currently underway, Kendall, and that's where we got to leave.
Absolutely. We'll be back again next week. Thanks very much for joining us. Sure hope that you enjoyed the discussions we had throughout the week on all those topical issues, and we're hoping that you have a good weekend.
On that note, ciao for now. Arrivederci.
Lejeng Munat.